The horseshoe stirred the mud and stopped at the gate. The horseshoe stirred the mud and stopped at the gate. Qi Juin hangs his cloak between his arms, carries a gloomy sky behind him, and looks at the towering city walls of Lidu. At this moment, the sky was not yet bright. The 8th Battalion teenagers stationed on the city wall saw Qidong's flag and immediately stretched out his voice and shouted, "Open the door, welcome to the commander." Several city soldiers shouted at the door to pull the door, and Ji Tua made a muffled noise, and the mottled city gate slowly rose. The soldiers at the 8th Battalion inside the city gate were separated on both sides, saluting Qi Juin in front of the gate. Qi Juin raised his arms, and the Qidong cavalry behind him backed neatly, leaving her a considerable distance. She shook the reins and embarked on the official way of the capital with the carriage of flowers. The soldiers on both sides stood solemnly without squinting. Qi Juin wore a court dress today. Although she had no title, she was qualified to wear a marquis dress because her queen mother kissed her. As the base of the court suit, Busey embroidered the white zeal that transcended the rank. The hair crown of the men's clothing was changed. He wore 5 beads and swayed in the air as the horses moved around. In front of the official road is a welcoming court official, standing next to the commander Genie Wei to make Han Yu and the internal supervisor Fu Man. A slight greeting from both sides will lead Qi Juin into the palace. The streets were clear, no one was hustle, and I was so silent that I only heard the solitary bird. Han Yen got on the side of Qi Juin and laughed. Bian County wins, the handsome man has worked hard, and this time he has entered the capital, he will have a great reward. Although she said this kindly, she stood on the pain point of Qi Juin. She did not confer the title on several occasions. Now she is rebelling from the north. She took the opportunity to remove the imprisonment from the prison army, and became a southeast thorn that could threaten concessions to the concubine, which had long dissatisfied the Queen Mother. At this moment, next to the battle in Biantia, the title is the Queen Mother's chain to check and balance Qi Juin. Qi Juin did not deal with Han Yen, and was unhappy in the previous few times. At this moment, he and Han Yen were hypocritical and said, "Let the commander make good luck." The two of them were on the horse right away, staying at the gate of the palace, followed by Fu Man, who was all the way, quickly rolled off the horse and personally came to take Qi Juin's reins. The East Factory fell after the death of Emperor Tianqian. The 24 Yamen never had a great who could call the wind and rain like Pan Rugi, and Fu Man was a man with his tail in his hands. Qi Juin disliked the internal concubine, and the double happiness of the imperial army sent by the imperial court is still in the cell of Tsang County. In order to avoid Qi Juin's suspicion, Fu Man dresses up specially. He wears a calabash seed, a coral needle, a cover on the outside, and black boots on his feet, so he dares to lean on simplicity. Fu Manha brought Qi Juin's reins around his waist, and smiled. "This is our Kanma of the Big Week, and No Baojuan feeds the coach." Qi Juin nodded, looked back at the carriage, and stood in front of it waiting for Hua Xiangyi. Han Sun threw the whip to the in-laws next to him, sniffed thinly, and pointed at Fu Man with a grin. "You old thief, when you see the boss, you will be rewarded immediately, you can shoot vigorously." Fuman knew Han's nature and immediately said, "The commander makes this a slave. He leaned closer and flattered Han. Slaves usually rely on the commander. "You see, when can you be a slave? Wish? You are 1 year old with me and you call me grandpa," Han Yen said. "I was panicking when I said it." "Your mother." Fu is full of slander, and this dog Day takes Joe all day long, talking with a panic in his mouth. Can he make him call his grandson? God has eyes, and it's really pleasant to have him not give birth to a son. Fu Man caressed his chest and laughed. While the old ancestor was still in front, the slave-in-law was the son, and you should be called grandfather according to seniority? Han Yen didn't look at these imprisoned nephews, but he was happy to treat them like dogs. The nephews were ancestors in the late Yongyi period. At that time, Pan Rugi led the East Factory to press Genie Wei. Han Han was not the commander. He watched Ji Lei recognize Pan Rugi as a father and was envious. Now Feng Shui turns and looks at Fu Man bowing in front of me. I feel happy. Fu Man went to the Nei Shutong, literacy, and Tianqian Emperor combined with Shao Qia internally and externally during the period of Emperor Tianqian to achieve the departmental supervision. Later, Emperor Tianqian was assassinated by Mu Ru. He immediately defeated him and obeyed Han Han's command. He summoned Shao Qia into the palace with a roll of imperial decree, so Han Shi framed Shao Qia. In response to this credit, Han Yen also continued to let him take care of the internal affairs of the DPRK. Anyway, Feng Quan went on, and Fumin would be able to become an ancestor if he tried his qualifications again. Seeing Hua Xiangyi has not come down yet, Han Yen asked Fumin casually, "How is Chu Jun?" At the beginning, Han Yen had a trick in the prison game, but did not kill Li Jianting, which made him support Han Jiazi's ascension. He settled with Xue Xiuzhua and arranged for Fu Man to stare at Chu in the palace. Fumin whispered, "Everything is normal." Xue Yanqing was chasing the chaos in the Chadan city recently. Chao Han looked at Fu Man. The Queen was worried at night and the jade body was embarrassed. You watch to wake up Chu Jun and let Xue Yanqing is calm and calm. Blessed with a moment of bliss, he immediately buried himself. The point of this sentence is to make Xue Xiuzhua calm. As for what method to use, he must be blessed to think for himself. Li Jianting is no longer small, but the Queen Mother has been slow to return to the right to save the monarch. She sits on behalf of the right of Emperor and expels Li Jianting out of the court. Li Jianting's right to listen is proposed by the eunuch. Now Xue Xiuzhua is pressing tight again in the foreign dynasty. This is to teach Xue Xiuzhua a lesson. Fu Man's heart pounded. He didn't dare to show half a point, and kept bowing until Han Yu left. Water dripped from the eaves, the window was ebb, and the old books on the table were wrinkled. Yao Wenyu took wide sleeves and turned the pages of the book to dry. In March, the snow and ice melted, and Duanzhou suddenly became warm, with tide everywhere. Xin Zichuan stood at the table and casually looked at Yao Wenyu's old book. Military levy Xue Yanqing had to talk to the commander in detail. Yao Wenyu smoothed the wrinkles with his fingertips. Last year Qidong only had battles in the Bian County. At that time, the rations were supplied by the capital, and the remaining 4 counties were not damaged. Xue Yanqing, I have a ledger in my heart, and I won't be easily taken in by the Queen Mother. It's easy to stump him. Xin Zichuan didn't look up, as if pondering the contents of the book. Qidong's harvest has not been reported in detail, and the marshal's bite is not enough. He can't force it. The longer Yao Wenyu stayed with Xin Zichuan, the more he felt that the monarch's mood was better distinguished. For example, now Xin Zichuan is joking, this trick of tricks can't deceive Xue Xiuzhua, who is good at checking accounts. Yao Wenyu was not in a hurry, but asked, in accordance with the opinion of the governor, what should Xue Yanqing talk to the coach? Naturally is his biggest card, Xin Zichuan said without thinking. He held Chu Jun in his hands, and at some point he stood taller than the Queen. Both of them pay attention to the general ethics, and the Queen is the governing party. She is only act for the right of the emperor, not the real emperor. The Queen Mother relied on Qidong, but she married Hua Xiangyi in the past, and then pressed Qi Juin to not raise her. At the same time, in order to please Qi Juin, she was quite generous with Qi Juin within the limits. Last year Shuangxi and Lu Pingyan confronted Qi Juin. They all turned a blind eye, and the Queen Mother still endured without accountability. This is to maintain the high and low of the two sides, and always press Qidong under his own hands, so that Qi Juin can not only be used by himself, but also be restrained by Wu Jue's inability to turn his face. However, Li Jianting does not have this concern. She is now the well-known Chu Jun of Dezhou. She has the cabinet teaching, the prestige of the students, and the supporters led by Xue Xiuzhua. Qi Juin is loyal to her and she is justified. Impeachment, Fong Kizwian is a one-word thing, and this is exactly what the Queen Mother in an awkward position cannot do. Shun Zichuan closed the page and said, "As soon as the marshal is closed, Qidong's military power is unstable. Qiuyin is the root of Qi Juyin, who cannot be attributed to orthodox. Imagine if she was killed in battle or dismounted from injury. The brothers in the family can take this opportunity to seize the title of Qi Xiu. The commander of the 5 county soldiers and horses listens to the prestige, but if there is no baron, she is just a temporary resident in that position and cannot inherit everything behind Qi Xiu. The Queen Mother is afraid Qidong will be the second, they are far from the north, so they dare not seal it, and this dare is the greatest weakness of the Queen Mother. What does Jiantingli lack most now? Is military power. The family broke Wei Huaigu and fell into a disadvantage in the case of Hai Liangyi's death. The Queen Mother was able to sit on par with the cabinet and Shuexiuzhui in the game, because she was holding the 2 remaining military powers of Dezhou in both hands. Whether it was Kong Yen or Shuexiuzhui, they were all civil servants, with only military bargaining power and no troop transfer power. If Shuexiuzhui gave Qi Juin's promise at this moment, then Qi Juin could transfer to His Majesty Chu and give up dealing with the Queen Mother. Qidong's soldiers and horses also naturally surrendered to Li Jianting. This was an arm of the Queen Mother. Wealth is good, Yao Wenyu said after taking over the book from Shun Zichuan. If Shui Yanqing doesn't have a bank vault, he can't convince the coach by verbal promises, but he bears the Qidong army, and the coach must think again and again. The above assumptions are based on the fact that Qidong Juntan can really be self-sufficient and does not need to be compulsorily recruited from the Jushi granary. However, Qidong's military grain this year is actually in the hands of Shun Zichuan. Qi Juin must take care of Zhongbua. She must weigh it well. If Shun Zichuan is dissatisfied with her transfer to Chu Jun, then Yen can cut off Qidong's military rations. Qi Juin still has to ask Wu to have rations, and Shuexiuzhui has to return to the original predicament. Shuexiuzhui, Hua Heshu. Shun Zichuan gently dropped Yao Wenyu's waist pen into the pen holder and laughed. Who am I to play with? Shun Zichuan's wrist bone was immersed in daylight, and he held an invisible line in his hand, which could quietly promote the situation in Ba Du. Yao Wenyu straightened the pen and said firmly, "The monarch has made arrangements." Before dawn, Gong Yi was waiting under the eaves of the palace, and they all avoided the lantern, and silently followed the road. When Qi Juin entered the palace, he had to go to Mingli Hall, while Hua Xiangyi had to wait in the queen's dormitory, and the 2 of them could only walk one way together. Hua Xiangyi was wearing a lying rabbit because she was afraid of the cold. Her manners were so good, she didn't hear the sound of Peihuan while walking, and stood just a little short beside Qi Juin. Qi Juin stayed in Bianjuan during Qidong Qingri. He didn't say a few words to Hua Xiangyi so far. I felt a little dull at the moment and wanted to speak. Hua Xiangyi said, "Look at the ledger at home?" Qi Juin then remembered the last crop and said, "I went back home and watched there was labor." She got stuck on the word mother for a while, and couldn't say to Hua Xiangyi's face 2 years younger than herself. I can only pass hastily and say. Waxianji covered Tangpo, watching the crows glance across the gloomy sky, and disappeared in the palace eaves in a blink of an eye, which was a familiar scene for her. She said, "The handsome is polite." Qi Juin and Yu Guang saw that the fragrant branches of sunflowers were embroidered between the collars of flowers, as if they were hidden under the dignity, and they were incompatible with this deep palace, so they looked very beautiful and lovely. Suddenly, Hua Xiangyi tilted her head and looked at Qi Juin. She only looked away and said softly, "The ant summoned the commander, first to send troops to the mouse department, and second to the military food collection. These 2 things can be combined. For one, the commander has to make a choice." Qi Juin couldn't figure out what Hua Xiangyi was telling her at the moment what she meant. Her queen was used as a knife by this queen to intimidate Shuexiuzhui and the cabinet. She had heard about Dan Qingtiantak. Hua Xiangyi turned her head and said, "You do is always windy and standing upstairs can't see Ronghua before the steps. It's so cold again, many shops on Shenwu Street have closed their doors, and those who are drunk at night are fasting. People." Qi Juin froze, looking at Hua Xiangyi. Hua Xiangyi had stopped, and smiled sideways at Fu Man, who was silent, public male cat-like. Fuman himself was in a state of turmoil. He faintly listened to what was cold, and didn't go to his heart. Seeing the flowers fragrant standing in front of him, he felt that the three ladies could not be overlooked, and he laughed at the lantern and said, "The slave is afraid of shocking Mrs. Yaxing and the boss, and dare not make a noise. Now that you are here," Hua Xiangyi whispered to Qi Juin, "go ahead, Marshal." The newly planted flowers and trees on the side of the Mingli Hall were covered with frost. The front of the hall was empty and the floor was polished. The name was announced in the hall, and the led Qi Juin to the next level. She stepped on that step and felt cold under her feet, a feeling she couldn't get used to no matter how many times. The curtain opened to the sides and Qi Juin stepped in. Several courtiers waiting inside got up. Qi Juin didn't look at anyone, and saluted to the Queen Mother. The Queen did not put down the bead curtain and said with a smile, "The AI family and the bamboo sound only disappeared in 2 months, and they felt very missed. The bitter cold of the county over there. Get up and let the AI family take a closer look." Qi Juin looked up, and Yu Guang saw Chu Jun standing beside him. Chen Zhen, a soldier of the Ministry of War, stood on his sleeves, watching Qi Juin's eyes a little worried. Sun Yu's complexion is not very good-looking. The atmosphere in this hall is strange, like the newly planted flowers and trees outside, seemingly connected with pedicles, but they are actually on the surface, and the roots have already been frozen. The Queen is holding the rush and is not eager to get into the subject. After a brief conversation with Qi Juin, he said, "You are stationed at the side all year round, and the wind is coming in the rain. I see a ent stop tossing like this." She didn't wait for Qi Juin to answer, and looked at Helian Ho. "Look." When facing the eyes of the Queen Mother, Helian Ho said with emotion, "When the minister saw the marshal, he thought of the inexplicable Fei Shi. Although he was a male, he didn't know Ling Yunji, so Chen Hao was troubled. Fei Shi has just won the championship. Someone must be on the side to give guidance. Otherwise, the good boy is also bad." The Queen Mother looked at Qi Juin again. "Juin, remember your brother Fei?" Qi Juin said, "It's vaguely remembered is Zhao Yue's brother." She seemed to be used to it and answered it casually, but the owner of Zhaoyue County had to call her sister, which was a sidetrack with Fei Shi. The Queen Mother said, "Fei Shi is very young, and no one teaches Zheng Zheng. You are the commander-in-chief of Qidong soldiers and horses. He admires him very much. He hangs Sister Qi in his mouth and wants to run to Qidong. It's not a stranger. If you get empty these days, you can talk to him about Bian Yiwen, and that's a good idea for him. Fei Shidu has reached the top. What can't be done, and she wants Qi Juin to follow. Moreover, Fei Shi is only a little Howie, who has not inherited the title of Helian Ho, and has no official position. Standing in front of Qi Juin is not too short." He called her sister that it was messy. The Queen had an obvious meaning. This was to hold Qi Juin to point Fei Shi to her. Qi Juin could not turn her face for the military concubine. She said, "The Queen Mother commanded that you shouldn't quit, but this time the entry is really military affairs, and the sidelines are urgent, and it should not be delayed." The Queen sat back slightly, and did not embarrass her, but instead said, "This is natural. Last month, the military newspaper stated that the Green Mouse Department had committed an offense. You won, and you deserve it." Qi Juin understood the bitterness of Ba Du. The Queen gave Fei Shi to her at this juncture, but she wanted to be honest while attacking Shuexiuzhua. Military rations are a problem if she does not have Shen Zichuan's supply. Qi Juin suddenly remembered Hua Xiangyi's words. "Batu windy. What is Hua Xiangyi suggesting to her? You gave the soldier's family member AI family the same. You want to take advantage of it. This is right, but it's not the right moment. The Queen Mother couldn't get Qi Juin's compromise, so she said, March is spring plowing, Qidong wants to fight, the army must be left vacant, and the grain after the autumn must be reduced, and it must be adjusted from other granaries, but it cannot be replaced now, and the people in Jueshi also have to eat. The court also had difficulties in the court. It is the people who suffer. The Queen kept silent about the 8-city granary, which was left to Qi Juin for her own mention. As long as she raised it, she could kick the question to Shuexiuzhua. At that time, everyone was deadlocked and still had to listen to the Queen's dispatch. If Shuexiuzhua didn't wave his hand and Qi Juin didn't marry, Qidong would not be able to send soldiers or get food. Suddenly the needle was heard inside the hall, and no one snored on either side. Qi Juin thought about Hua Xiangyi's words in the middle. At the beginning of the year, the Ministry of Households reported the harvest situation in various places, said Li Jianting, who had never intervened in Mingletang, coldly. Juixi can't afford it, and he can join the granaries in the other states to fill the gap. The Queen Mother said, Chu Jun ignores the affairs and does not understand the way. Hezhou made a round last year. This year, it will supply the Lidu granaries with Jueshi, which is difficult to do everywhere. During their conversation, they avoided the 8 big cities, and Qi Juin flashed aura. The 8 major cities surround the capital. Isn't it the pre-order prosperity of capital? Hua Xiangyi said he couldn't see clearly. What wasn't clear? Can't see the details of the 8-city harvest. Since Danqing field tax can be used as a false account, how much of the field tax in the remaining cities is true? The fields did not measure and understood, and there was more to be concealed in the meantime. Hua Xiangyi's last sentence was about an empty stomach. Last year, countless people in Danqing were running hungry. Pan Yiming couldn't hide it, so why didn't he set up a shed for porridge immediately? In a few moments, Qi Juin's sweat fell down, and he said secretly. The cane chair dangled slightly, and the white armbands were on his knees. Shun Zichuan opened the folding fan, blocking out some sunlight. Yao Wenyu was still packing old books at the table, and the courtyard was quiet. Shun Zichuan looked at the plum leaves above his head as he dangled, and the light fell on him. He took a folding fan and held it in front of his eyes. Yao Wenyu turned from an old book to a case of criminal affairs. He opened it and saw that it was the earliest grain register in Chazhou. He has also seen it before, but then God turned the ghost backwards, turned the four-wheeler and said to the door Shun Zichuan, the high-priced grain in Chazhou in the past was Hezhou grain, but Hezhou also paid for it last year. With the military rations and the Badu granary, I think all the goods are on this account. If Yanheru still bears the food of the Luoshan bandits, even if Hezhou has a good harvest every year. He slowly flattened the booklet, it should be empty. I originally suspected Yen how to sell the grain stolen from Jueshi and Hezhou, but when Fanzhou's account came out, I found that there was no grain left in the granaries in these 2 places to do business for him. Lang Yeshan began to manage the taxation of Jueshi and Hezhou last year. Yanheru said last time that he failed to establish a relationship with Liang Yeshan. Yao Wenyu held the door frame, his expression changed slightly. Where did all the food he sold last year come from? Are you here? Shun Zichuan tilted his head and looked at Yao Wenyu for a moment. 8 cities granaries. Yanheru's last year's resale of grains to Zhongbua states flowed out of the 8 cities. Yao Wenyu quickly flipped through the booklet. Fan and Deng's high-priced grains were resold by Kaiyu's hands. The prince killed Kaiyu. Yanheru didn't tell the truth. The folding fan in Shun Zichuan's palm suddenly closed, and he was still leaning back, gazing at the sunlight. Immediately after that, he said, the Queen Mother did not have a reserve of Qidong military rations. She drew cakes in the air. This step of cheating completely trapped Shuexiuzhua, and Bacheng's account was so bad that even Pan Yen may not know which ones are true or false. Shuizhou's Dan Qingtian was indeed wrong. Pan Yi's earliest detailed harvest was also fake, but the grain surplus submitted by the family was real. They encroached on the people's land without food, because the food had been secretly sold to Yen Haru for a long time. The Bacheng granary is simply empty. Flower cranes. Shin Zichuan laughed loudly and had to sigh with emotion. The Queen Mother is too good. If Shuizhou was forced to call for rations, he would not check Dan Qingtian, and he stepped back to show his favor to the Queen Mother. Then when he really did all this, he would find that the Queen Mother had no food at all, and Qidong still could not send troops. At that time, Shuizhou will not only lose his existing advantages, but also bear the risk of learning too much, and will even face questions from the factions. Hua Hejin is not a courtier. She has her own way of playing in this group of sophisticated men. The author has something to say. It's late, the doubles are one. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. Qi Juin's mind flew in an instant. She weighed the weight of the left and right sides, and must find the best ally in Qidong in this game. Winning or losing in this game is equally important to Qidong. It even determines how long Qi Juin can stay in the position of commander-in-chief. Qi Juin's mind flew in an instant. She weighed the weight of the left and right sides, and must find the best ally in Qidong in this game. Winning or losing in this game is equally important to Qidong. It even determines how long Qi Juin can stay in the position of commander-in-chief. Qi Juin made up his mind and said, "The minister hasn't talked to the adults of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Households in detail, and he doesn't know about the grain storage in other places. However, the harvest of the 4 counties in Qidong last year was acceptable. If you send troops, you can join up with other grain warehouses barely. Can support for 2 months. You are a general. You naturally understand better than Ijia. To continue to the desert, marching alone will take a month." The Queen Mother whispered softly, "It is now March, and the 4 counties have been spring plowed. 2 months later, if it does not return, then the July-autumn harvest will be delayed." Juin, the AI family is by no means unwilling to send troops, but cannot send troops. Qi Juin seemed to be stumped, and the silence in Mingli Hall fell into silence again. The Queen stood up slowly, looking at the court officials, and said bitterly, "If De Jout Songjie is fulfilled, even if the bamboo sounds are not sought, the Grief family will fight. But the court is shy at this moment, and it is really powerless. Moreover, the people take food as the sky. In this fight, the people in the 3 places will be hungry. Isn't that upside down? Paran, you have read the report of the Ministry of Households at the beginning of the year, and you know the situation everywhere." Qi Juin was in the hall. How could the courtiers refute it? The Queen Mother was so restless, forcing them to mention the 8 cities by themselves, Kong Yen holding his own bag, standing on the side without expression. After a while, Kong Jing said, "Qidong's move is not a trivial matter, and it should have a specific charter. The new commander of the capital should not talk to the cabinet in detail, so let's wait until we finish talking tonight before making a decision." This was a strategy of slowing down soldiers. Neither did he follow the intention of the Queen Mother, nor did she make a decision for Shuizhou. Liang Qiaoshan's account book has been copied, but now it is a pity that he can't take Danqing under his hands. At the time, the people came out of Mingletang in turn. Fengquan clothed Li Jianting in front of him. Li Jianting slowed a few steps, waiting for Kong Jing to come out. Kong Yen raised his arm to lead the way for Li Jianting, took Chu Jun to the next level, and walked on the open field. "His Royal Highness is outspoken today," Kong said. "The proposal to integrate granaries everywhere is indeed a way." Li Jianting pursed his lips a bit and then smiled again, saying to Kong Jing, "Yuan Fu had talked with me a little earlier, and I don't dare to forget it. At this moment, it seems that it is really too difficult to get all the military rations." It was already dawning, the puddles on the ground reflected the blue sky, and the eaves covered the last glimmer. Li Jianting took a few steps and said, "The Lord Chongshan is very good. He heard that his mental calculation is fast and accurate, and his account will never go wrong. Since the Danchengshan tax case is temporarily postponed, why do Ent Yuan Fu ask him to calculate remaining grain? 3 places are not enough, and there are 8 cities, everyone is working together." Kong Yen smiled bitterly. Now the military rations are going to leave Jushi, and they are struggling to borrow food from the 8 cities. Kong Yen suddenly stopped talking and looked at Li Jianting seriously. What Li Jianting said was to let the cabinet count, but did not say to let the cabinet investigate, but the meaning of the word difference is very different. Regardless of the former Queen Mother's refusal, the cabinet can count Liang Qingshan's surplus food in the 8 cities, because there is a problem with Dancheng's account. Pan Yi is still closed. The Ministry of Households should now recalculate the surplus food in the 8 cities. Li Jianting's brows were red and gorgeous, but she did not take away Chu Jun's charm. She seemed to mention it casually, and she was a little helpless about her gaze. Qi Juin stepped out of the palace door and saw Xue Xiuzhua standing not far. She pulled off the jacket on her shoulder and threw it to Qi Wei, who greeted her, pointed to Xue Xiuzhua and motioned as she walked. "I just listened to Chen Shangshu and said that this time you gave the military concubine," Qi Juin said. "Thank you very much." Xie Juin's xie was naturally not that simple. Xue Xiuzhua heard the meaning, followed Qi Juin, and walked a long way. He said, "The commander used the soldier and mouse department to restrain Amor. The battle in the north is urgent. This battle should be fought." Qi Juin avoided the issue of having his own rations, but said, "Before I entered the capital, I heard that the rations would be transferred from Jueshi. Jiang // Castle Peak wouldn't agree? You also have difficulties." Early morning in Badu, it was not so cold, and the vendors in the streets were busy. They all wore official uniforms, and no one dared to get close, and ordinary people avoided 3 feet. When they walked over, they looked at Qi Juin and whispered. Qi Juin, who was rumored to have suffered from a stroke, was just tall. She was neither powerful nor majestic, but she was calm and could stand these snoops and speculations. "But you're right, this battle should be fought." Qi Juin's 5 beads swayed in the wind, and her frizzy hair was slightly chaotic, brushing her cheeks. She went on to say, "Leaving north is the opposite, but the North Iron Ride is still the iron wall northeast of Batu. After the North King died, the battlefield this year has been slow to see good news, and it was really hard. You are in Batu, far away, the 12th part of Biantia is half knowledgeable, and only a few military newspapers cannot depict Amor's ambitions. Don't always feel that they really can't enter. I am the capital of heaven and earth, and I have rested here for centuries of prosperity. It is different from the frontiers of the wind and dust, and has not been hit by a knife so far. It has only been 7 years since the defeat of Zhongbubing, but the fear at that time has not been found in Lidu. The fear of Biantia cavalry here has long faded. Amor has commanded 6. In Gudel, following the military camp of Dezhou, Qidong will not send troops again this year, and he will not be able to stay out of the scene. I can tell you that my soldiers can't run away from the Biantia cavalry. The lost city can't support it, then the Biantia cavalry has slid into the capital, and I can't catch up." The wind intensified slightly. Qi Juin stood still and turned to look at Xue Xiuzhua. Behind her is the towering Zhu Wall. The stacked eaves soared into the clear sky, and there was no cloud above her head, and the puppets were exposed in the morning light like this. "I must send troops." Qi Juin didn't jump in his eyes. Qidong rarely participates in the affairs of Badu. Qi Xiu is very clever. Whether he is dealing with Qidong's relationship with Li Bei or maintaining the friendship between Qidong and his family, he can find the most appropriate time for his team. But Qi Juin couldn't do it. She didn't have the patience of Qi Xiu. She would rather attack the Green Mouse department at the risk of being dismissed by Badu, because she knew that the battle situation was far more urgent than the political situation. The Queen forced Shuexiuzhua into submission, but she also forced Qi Juin to marry Fei Shi, which showed that she would not give Qi Juin any title, and even revealed the signs of wanting to divide Qi Juin's military power. Maybe someone is better than Qi Juin, but at this moment that is about the north-south battlefield, Qi Juin will not give Qidong military power to anyone other than her. Since the Queen Mother already has the idea to move her, she will not sit still. As long as I leave the army before I leave, I can approve the Ministry of Defense order can be issued. Qi Juin suddenly laughed. It is not difficult to get stuck in your rations. I will not force Jueshi's food. Shuexiuzhua lifted away the willow branches and said, "The deal." The incense in the hall was a bit heavy, and the flower fragrance smelled tired for a long time. Aunt Liuyu hurriedly let people open the windows, and helped Hua Xiangyi sit on the bed next to the window. She said earnestly, "Miss 3 has only been away for half a year, and the slave has looked a lot thinner." Then Qidong was next to Huangsha and suffered 3 times. Mississippi Hua Xiangyi looked at Pa Zi and said, "Aunt is thinner." She turned her eyes and saw the small Buddhist temple in the middle. Aunt Ryukyu said, "The Queen Mother misses Miss 3. She blesses Miss 3 every day in the presence of the Bodhisattva. When she got cold last night, she wanted to see Miss 3. It was useless to take the medicine, and she only let the slaves light the lamp to read letter from Miss 3. They were talking, and outside the temple shouted. Hua Xiangyi went out to greet her. The Queen Mother didn't want her to salute, took her hand, stood at the door and looked at the figurine carefully, and said, "Why is it so thin? Isn't it easy to eat in the house? AI family picks a few for you, a chef, pick from our city, and take it with you when you leave." The Queen Mother moved emotionally, her eyes faintly shed tears, and she caressed Hua Xiangyi's palate. "How do you do?" Hua Xiangyi shook her queen's hand and choked slightly. "I miss her aunt." The Queen Mother brought her in, and she broke her heart when she heard her words. When she sat on the couch and did not let her go to the side, she said next to herself, "How is Qi Xiu treating you? Qi Juin treats you well?" The family heard that he was in the yard. "The auntie is not restless. If anyone dares to offend you, you will let the wife bind and send it out directly, and the family will support you." Hua Xiangyi broke his tears and laughed. The Queen hugged her like a child and said, "I used to think about marrying and writing letters, but now I know what it means to be far apart." The Queen wanted to choose the best husband for Hua Xiangyi. Unexpectedly, she married Qi Xiu, but also wanted Qi Xiu to be a hero of I. In addition to being old, she barely deserves it. She regretted taking this move, facing Hua Xiangyi, and couldn't help but give everything good. Hua Xiangyi leaned on her Queen Mother and said, "How is your aunt? The front hall is a mess, and AI's family is not good at eating and sleeping." The Queen Mother paused for a moment, and then laughed at herself. "In the end, she is older and more spiritual than ever." Hua Xiangyi slowly got up and said softly, "Why is your aunt so laborious? In the state affairs there is Yunsuk Posuk. I heard that Chu Jun is also easy to learn." The Empress Dowager supported Emperor Xianda, and can now also support Chu Jun. In Hua Xiangyi's opinion, Li Jianting is far more reliable than the previous 2. Although she is in Qidong, she knows everything about the city. The Queen sighed. She remembered what Li Jianting said in Mingletang just now, and she was more wary of Chu Jun, saying, "You want to be shallow, how can Chu Jun get along well? A is instigating a fight with AI's family." Hua Xiangyi was silent for a moment and said, "I've been married to Qidong, and I know a little bit about Bianxia and Zhonghua. Auntie, Shun Zichuan has become a trend in Zhonghua, but his nature is not bad. It is a good thing to regain Duanzhou's replanning. Last year I asked Zhaoyue what was happening in Danqing. She said that Pan Yi was not sure and starved too many people. The couple wanted to help the refugees, but there was no food in the warehouse and there was nothing they could do." The The Queen Mother gradually closed her eyes and listened for a long time, saying, "The family of grief knows that you are good, but now is the time for success or failure." The Queen Mother opened her eyes again and looked at Hua Xiangyi. "You live in the palace and leave the city. There are also things I do and know about." Xian Danayan copied his home, and Ai's family was trapped in the harem. At that time, the eunuchs who were facing the yamen also dared to go to the front of the Ai's house to save money. There are too many people. You see that Shui's brother-in-law didn't do anything, and ruined his family. He was called and drunk. What kind of decent? You look at Shui Yanqing, the in the jerk, he has to count it. The Danqing field tax is to take us as a stepping stone for Chu Jun. If he is really checked, how many of the 8 cities can run? The Queen also sat upright. Without a family history, what else does the AI family fight with them? There is a problem with the tax, and the AI family will liquidate itself later, and it will not be possible for others to intervene. There is also Shen Zichuan, who is arrogant with Xiao Qia. What they want to do, AI family, you can see clearly. You think he is looking at the ground, but he is staring at Jiao Zhongyu clearly. These chaotic thieves are doing fame, and Shen Wei is pressing him. Hua Xiangyi said everything gently. She looked at the Queen's chest and knew that the Queen was determined and she would not coexist with Chu Jun. She stopped talking and listened to the sound of rain from outside, and it started to rain. The author has something to say. It's late. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. The rain suddenly stopped, and Liang Jinshan's boots were full of mud spots. He stepped into the door with a robe angle, and the officials waiting in the office of the Ministry of Ministry were already waiting. He heard the rain outside stop abruptly, took out a handkerchief and wiped off the thin sweat on his face, and said simply, "Let's count." The rain suddenly stopped, and Liang Jinshan's boots were full of mud spots. He stepped into the door with a robe angle, and the officials waiting in the office of the Ministry of Ministry were already waiting. He heard the rain outside stop abruptly, took out a handkerchief and wiped off the thin sweat on his face, and said simply, "Let's count." The sound of the abacus twitching inside the room suddenly crackled, as if it were a proper shower, and it fell down again in the office. Liang Minshan held the cabinet ticket and sat on the teacher's chair, reopened the 8 city books that had been piled up, and buried his head for recalculation. He calculated well and knew the taxes, and the posting speed was fast, but for the sake of stability, he still had an abacus and pen and paper near him. It was raining all night in the Hubu office, and during that time, only the escorts went in and out to make refreshing tea for everyone. However, in the noise, the Queen Mother remained awake all night. The incense burner was burned in the hall. The Queen Mother turned the beads, and leaned on the couch to be kicked by her aunt. There is no one else in this hall. The Queen removed Dongzhu, and her eyes closed with false eyes. The commander has already breathed with Fumin, Aunt Liaoyu said quietly. There should be some movement on Chu Jun's side. The Queen opened her eyes slightly and said, "Today's discussion at Mingli Hall." Chu Jun also interjected. The family looked at Kong Baran and treated her feelings, and she really became a student. "It wasn't all that Shui Yanqing taught," said Aunt Liaoyu in an orderly manner. "She's raised outside the palace. How can I understand government affairs? I don't know whether to advance or retreat, regardless of priority. She wants to get involved in the administration of politics, and she must have that confidence." Today Qi Juin refused to promise the family of grief, but nothing more than that Shui Xiuzhua has a retreat. They are anxious to count the remaining food in the 8 cities. He looked at his hand wrapped around the beads. Just leave it alone. The lights were slightly dim, and the Queen Mother looked at her with ease, without panic. Liang Qiaoshan grew more and more frightened. He dialed the abacus several times in the noisy abacus sound, but the result was just like his mental calculation. Danqing's grain storage at the Ministry of Re-examination had no problem. According to the amount of surplus grain, It was estimated that it is the most abundant granary in Dezhou now. How did that happen? Liang Yenshan pushed away the abacus and stood up, again holding the sweat on his face with a papa. Pan Yin leaned on a chair, his face paled by the candlelight. He was kept here for a few days, and the wrinkled robe corners showed the family's wolves. He dangled his spirits and looked at Shuexiuzhua with tired eyes. When you inspected the tax of Bachengtian at the beginning of the year, you also knew the details of their granaries. Shuexiuzhua was also very tired. He covered his eyes with a damp patch for a while and recovered a little. Has the granary in Baqing been vacant? Pan Yin answered in silence. Accept it. Shuexiuzhua changed his name to Pan Yin. You let Yao Yuanzhua away because you still have good thoughts, you are not Wei Huaigu, so why bother conscientiously to do business for them? Danqing starved to death last year. Many people, if the court cannot rebuild the fields and return to the people, Danqing will still starve to death next year. Pan Huan slipped between his throat. He raised his head slightly, staring at the dark roof. Qi Juin has repeatedly entered the capital to seek troops. Qidong's garrison has not been able to send troops at this moment, and the 12th part of the Biantia has hit Bianjuan. Shuexiuzhua's eyes showed struggle, as if tortured. He said, Instead, I need food. I don't know where to fly out of the moth, rested on the window, and flew away again in the long silence, towards the night. It wandered in the night, passing by the swift carriage. The carriage stopped in front of the house, and Hung Hom lifted the curtain. Hua Xiangyi had already jumped down. Husband! Hua Xiangyi carried her skirt and ran after entering the gate. The in her hair was adorned with pearls, shaking violently during the run. Breathing, she walked through the complex vestibule and promenade, ignoring the surrounding exclamation, and ran into Qi Juin's courtyard. Qi Wei was talking to the servant, and suddenly he saw Hua Xiangyi running over. He was startled and thought it was an assassin. He shouted, Protect the marshal! The soldiers in the courtyard drew their swords when they were in a hurry, and the knife light flickered, and the pearls shaking with the fragrance of flowers set off against each other, covering the Lingwe moon frost. As soon as Qi Juin opened the door, she was splashed with pearls. Hua Xiangyi hurriedly supported her hair, exuding a thin sweat in her slightly rapid breathing. The Danqing granary is empty. No matter how much Danqing surplus grain is re-examined by the Ministry of Households, Hua Xiangyi still dangled her skirt and looked at Qi Juin. All are obstacles. Qi Juin gave Hua Xiangyi the cot and looked at Qi Wei. Qi Wei immediately stepped back, turned around and was discharged from the hospital, calling someone to report the news to Liang Yishan. At this moment it was almost 3 moments before the ugly time. When the second hour of Inshur, all the court officials would be ready to wait outside the palace gate. Pan Shi was completely silent after Shuexiuzhua said the sentence. He was a poet who had read poetry and had no way to look directly into Shuexiuzhua's eyes. He gazed at the roof and saw old signs of years of disrepair on the beams, and those parts that were not covered by the new paint were bare, covered with fine insect eyes and utterly messed up. Pan Yin sat here, but felt the wind. He silently counted the bug eyes and killed himself with a blunt knife in the silence. He understood that Shuexiuzhua's expression might be just a disguise, but he also understood that what Shuexiuzhua said was true. The silence he spent in his cell was not all about avoidance. I ask you, Pan Yin turned his head dully, and finally faced Shuexiuzhua squarely. He said, Why do you kill Yuan Zhua? Shuexiuzhua leaned on the back of the chair and looked directly at Pan Yin. You want to help Lise, and Hage also wants to help Lise. You supported Tianqin Emperor together and replaced Hua Xiqian. Pan Yin moved his shackled hand to the table, but he also killed Emperor Tianqin for Chu Jun. Shui Yanqing, you are hiding in the tide. I can't tell whether you are loyal or treacherous. Pan Shi needs an answer. Shuexiuzhua can wash away the part that he is not accommodated by the gentleman on this question. As long as he gives Pan Ji a reasonable reason, he can win a great victory tonight. But Shuexiozhua said, I killed Yao Yuanjua because he should kill. He didn't seem so straight because he stayed up all night, sitting opposite, and even willing to loosen his buttoned robe. The family always thought that this court is still their world, but as early as the last time of Yongyi years, they have lost control of the carriage. Look at your father. If the family is strong enough, then why is he here? The attack between the family and Han men hit both ends of the first mouse? The defeat of Xianda's mid-year soldiers made me understand one thing. Shuexiozhua raised his finger and pointed to the ground. Xiqian thought that he could play the amour in the east, but in fact he was just a walking dog trapped when Amur watched a Zhou. The most ridiculous thing was that when Hua Xiqian died, he thought he was holding the chain. People. The teacher and I watched the rise of the North King, and Tiechi became a valiant master in the northeast, but they were not used by the Li family. Their surname was Xiao. No matter how loyal Xiao Fangxiu and Xiao Jiming were, they would no longer accept it. The generals from Badu, they call themselves wolves, and also call themselves iron walls. Yes, they are indeed iron walls, but they also blocked Badu while blocking the sand cavalry. If it is not too late, Emperor Guangqing would dissolve the North Rail Rider as early as the end of Yongyi, and they were actually under the Li's army when they were called Luoxia cavalry. Did Ent Xiao Fangxiu understand? But he still refused to surrender his military power. He believes in himself. He may not be wrong, but he can't control the gradually solidified Iron Rider. A lot of people are suspicious, but who can ensure that such a large and powerful army will always have a sober command? Even Xiao Fangxiu himself knows well. Sitting here does not require verbal commitment and personal trust, but rather really weighing and restraining. Xiao Fangxiu knew long ago that he had to surrender a son to his concubine. The teacher looked for suitable opportunities to take into account the friendship and face of the North, but before the teacher did anything, Hua Xiqian would fill the gap. The loss of Zhongbo Liuzhou to Amur resulted in Shao Qi's entry into the capital becoming a heart disease in Lidu and Libei. Do you understand? There are scorpions from the desert in the water. Amur is relying on them to stir the situation and make Dazhou rot and stink, but the family pretends to be deaf. The teacher and I have supported Li Jianheng after a lot of hard work. Ascended the throne, hoping that Li Jianheng could clean up the chapel, but he was a complete waste. Yao Yuanjua's reputation has accumulated in a terrible place, but it can never be used by his grandmother. If I don't kill him, he will definitely be used by others. If you leave Yao Yuanjua for the so-called righteousness, you can now see the world famous. The tide is flowing to Zhongbua, and he is planning for Shenzichuan. Shuexiozhua paused for a long time and said without expression, I'm neither loyal nor treacherous. What exactly is he? He does not know. When he was enlightened, he was taught by Mr. Changzong that he could be a gentleman. He praised Qi Hualien in the past few years, and even had exchanges with Qi Hualien. He thought that Qi Hualien could understand his ambitions, but Qi Hualien refused. He respected Hai Liangyi and was willing to be driven by Hai Liangyi. Even today, he still calls Hai Liangyi a teacher, but Hai Liangyi firmly believes that Li Jianheng can become emperor under his own guidance. Shuexiozhua can't wait. He wants to be able to open up the chaotic monarch. If not, he can only be Bo. He didn't need pity or justification. He was willing to pay double the price for everything he had done. He has only one life, and he bet it on the dusk of the big week. No matter whether it is the dawn he expects after dark, he is willing to work hard. This is Dezhou and his last chance. Pan Yen raised his hands and covered his face at the table. After a long time, he said, I knew that Wei Huaigu was doing fake accounts when I was the servant of the Ministry of Housing, and that there was a problem with Danqing field tax. He revealed eyes with fine wrinkles. But my name is Pan Yen, I can only. Pan Yen didn't go on, he rubbed his face hard. There was a rush of footsteps outside the cell. Pan Yen and Shuexiozhua sat quietly, listening to the noisy approach. At the last moment the door was opened. Empty. Pan Yin said tiredly. 8 cities are empty. Shuexiozhua stood up arrogantly, sweeping the fatigue in front of the eunuchs behind his back, clasping his neckline, nodding slightly at Pan Mao, saying, "Thank you." There was a shadow outside the cell. Pan Shui said suddenly when Shuexiozhua was about to leave, "You have done your selfish desires and are no longer tolerated by ordinary people. As you said, what you want here is trade-offs. What else can you do for Chu Jun?" Pinned? Shuexiozhua glanced and did not answer. Pan Yin seemed to understand something. He watched Shuexiozhua leave. The jail door closed in a squeak sound, leaving him alone to sit here, and the small window on the side showed a thin morning light, but did not shine on Pan Mao. Pan Yin did his best. Pan Xiangjie turned over the boxes and looked for the ledger. The old books accumulated at the bottom of the box were all sharp weapons for him. When he woke up, he heard the wind and wanted to burn everything before Shuexiozhua arrived. Yong Yi Nian, Xiandan Nian, Tian Chen Nian. Pan Xiangjie bundled these accounts neatly. He knelt down in front of the box, pulled the rope with his bare hands, and threw all the books into the copper basin. Too much, he can't burn it alone. Pan Xiangjie was so anxious that his mouth was filled with sour water. He never thought that his mouth was his own son. He has been driven to an end, he can't stop there. Yong Yi Nian. Pan Xiangjie read his account along his fingers, the flower family. Hans. Everyone is here, Pan Xiangjie is ecstatic. As long as everyone is here, his Pan cannot die. Suddenly the running sound of military boots broke into the courtyard. Pan Xiangjie tightened his books, stood up holding the box, and walked to the door tremblingly. Here comes Han Yin. Pan Xiangjie forced to calm down, covering his wide sleeves, and said to Han Kuan, "It's not that far, can't the Queen Mother be able to bear it?" The method of abandoning the car to protect the car is by no means the best policy. Shuexiozhua and the family are incompatible. Today is to cut off our Pan family. No one can run away. Pan Xiangjie pretended to be confused all his life, followed Hua Xiqian and Wei Huaigu as head turtles, kneeling and begging for mercy at the chapel, but now he can speak clearly and fluently. Han Zheng, holding on to the handle, said, "You lie down at this moment and leave room for everyone to breathe, who dare not miss your kindness. I guarantee you will not die, and you will have a chance to revive your fandom in the future." Pan Xiangjie saw the knife approaching step by step and couldn't help raising his voice. "You killed me today, but you are forcing Shuexiozhua to step up. Danching is gone, how many days can Luqing be spared? Stop talking nonsense." Han Yen also sweated a little, and he waved his hand. "The Queen Mother knew that you would leave a retreat for yourself. This account is a mess, you must remember clearly and burn the yard." Pan Xiangjie held the door, watched his family members cry, and shouted in a messy situation, "These accounts I have let Qing Zhizhen copy them, you burn it? You killed me at this moment, these accounts will still fall into Shuexiozhua's hands." Pan Yu's treason has become a reality. Han Zheng pulled out his sword. "Isn't he secretly letting away Yao Wenyu? Yao Wenyu is now Shen Zichuan's conspirator. The evidence of your collaborating with the treasury is convincing. Believe? He is the fine work of Shen Zichuan staying in Badu." Pan Xiangjie fell to the ground while shoving, and he shouted, "Rabbits and dogs cook. Birds do their best. I'm a walking dog for gone, and I ended up with these endings today. Han Yi, I'm dead today, you how long can I live again?" Han Yun brought the badaling waist card and couldn't wait any longer. He walked towards Pan Xiangjie in the midst of a sudden rise in fire, and was about to cut with a knife. Unexpectedly, Qi Wei behind was faster, and instead of going around the promenade, he directly ran across the roof, swooped down from the top, and rolled out with Han Han. Taking this opportunity, Pan Xiangjie suddenly held up his ledger and shouted toward the entrance of the courtyard, "Master, save me!" Han Zheng struggled and threw out the waistband of the 8 camps and shouted, "At the foot of the sun, the army is the big one. Qi Juin's soldiers stopped at the suburbs. How dare they obstruct my behavior in the 8 camps? I asked the commander to catch the criminal. There is a ticket from the Ministry of Criminal Affairs and a command from the Ministry of Military Affairs. Why not? Shuexiuzhua opened his robe and said sternly, "Put the fire and take it with Han Han." Han Sun said, "I am the Queen Mother, do you dare?" The 8 major camps in the courtyard immediately drew their swords and hurriedly approached Shuexiuzhua. Qi Juin relied on the scabbard to open the blade, and later said, "Since the 8th Battalion is the capital, it is the Emperor's army. Chu Jun wants me to come to help with the case, but you want to listen to the Queen Mother?" Han Yen originally thought that Pan Xiangjie was cheating himself, but who knows that Qi Juin really came. He dared to kill before Shuexiuzhua came. He fought to hold the 8 camps and could threaten the cabinet. However, Qi Juin's soldiers and horses stopped outside the city, and he would definitely suffer. Han Yen was short and gritted his teeth, saying, "Naturally, let Chu Jun arrange." The bodying knife returned to its sheath, watching Qi Juin's relatives enter, and took Pan Xiangjie and Han Yen away. The fire did not last long, and it was easily extinguished. Shuexiuzhua waved the smoke and picked up several unburned books. The Queen Mother was surprised and heard that Shuexiuzhua took the ledger and couldn't help falling down on the couch. She frowned and hated, "Pan Xiangjie is a jerk." In order to survive, Pan Xiangjie dragged everyone into the water. "Where's Chu?" The Queen Mother resumed calmly. "Well, Shuexiuzhua has the ability to break the net with Ijiu. Then let him see if the true sun in his hand is hard enough." The Queen said that he had smashed the beads and threw them into the burning copper basin, splashing countless soot. After Han Yen was caught, he closed his eyes and slept. He faced the wall and ignored anyone, and Zhuan Shuexiuzhua was afraid to move himself. Pan Xiangjie regained his old appearance, sitting across the table with his sleeves and sobbing. "Explain. Explain." Pan Xiangjie wiped his tears. "But first told me to eat rice, Yanqing, I was very hungry." This old slipper is trying to delay time, holding the account book to the Queen Mother, waiting for the Queen Mother to get people. Although Liang Zhishan manages taxes, he has also seen these criminal trials, knowing that these old guys are not good at trial. He boiled for a night, sipped 2 cups of tea, and after being inspired by Shuexiuzhua, he said, "It takes time to cook the noodles and dishes," and the old man speaks slowly. Pan Xiangjie saw Liang Maoshan as if he was not angry, and only said, "Chong Shun and Qing Ji are familiar with me." He touched his belly, and said with a sad expression, "You can't be hungry at home. It's a mess." "How can I let the boss take the trouble?" Liang Minshan put the tea, "You just answer me. I counted Danqing's surplus grain yesterday, and found that the barn owl was full. You tell me if you bought it elsewhere before the household review. Grain as a surplus? Where do I manage the grain?" Pan Xiangjie spread his hands innocently, as if he was in a hurry. "I am in charge of the Ministry of Labor. For details of these grains, you can ask Dan Cheng's grain supervisor or Pan Yi. I asked a long time ago." Liang Minshan opened the booklet and showed it to Pan Xiangjie. They all explained. "You sold the food to Yenharu. Danqing sold it and the other 7 cities sold it, right? I don't even know Danqing's account. How do I know the rest of the 7 cities?" Pan Xiangjie knows that there are 10 things in it that Liang Minshan took out to slap himself. He said, "Since they have all explained, Yanqing, what are you doing? Submit it to the cabinet and give Yuan Fu a look." Shuexiuzhua said, "We have to discuss the matter in the early days, and we will report it immediately." Pan Xiangjie heard him report, and could not tell the true and false for a while. Liang Minshan found the ticket of the Ministry of Justice from his sleeve and said, "How else can you invite the boss to us? Naturally, it is in accordance with the law and the Ministry of Justice has approved it." Pan Xiangjie stared at the ticket for a while. Shuexiuzhua got closer, looking at Pan Xiangjie, and said, When the adult took charge of the Ministry of Work, when the Xianda Niangwanga case occurred, I saw that the embankment of the Kaling River was well repaired, indicating that the adult was also doing practical things, and he was willing to share his concerns. I didn't come here for the adult. He was very good, and he didn't get to the point of killing. Pan S was just a problem with his account. Let S make it clear that there is room for everything behind. This is telling Pan Xiangjie that if he hesitates again, there is no room for it. Pan Xiangjie sobbed, pulling his beard, and said to Shuexiuzhua, I really don't know where. Shuexiuzhua said, It seems that Danqing is Pan's private city. You deceived the court and colluded with the Ministry of Pan to embezzle the people's land in Danqing, falsely report the land tax, and resell the official food. Snakes and rattles killed hundreds of people, all of which you Pan alone took care of. Pan Xiangjie was so frightened that he saw Shuexiuzhua really come and hurriedly said, Yanqing. The account book, confession, and all the original texts were copied and reported to the cabinet. Shuexiuzhua ignored Pan Xiangjie. It's all right for those who corrupt the law, copy and pay taxes, and cut all over. The ledger hasn't been sorted out yet. Pan Xiangjie stood up. He shook his hands and said, Yanqing, let's talk in detail, I haven't explained yet. Shuexiuzhua turned back. Pan Xiangjie can only say, in this account, the prison door behind Shuexiuzhua suddenly opened, and the pen post followed, standing up, wondering what happened. Shuexiuzhua turned back, seeing the in the palace, cannot help but sweat. The little was out of breath, afraid to look directly at the courtier, kneeled down on the ground and hurriedly took a few steps on his knees. He said, Master, Lord. Chu Jun fainted suddenly when he came up. Yuan Fu urgently adjusted the doctor, now also. Just one step away. Shuexiuzhua's hands and feet were cold, and his account book was sweating coldly. Pan Xiangjie immediately shut up and sat back. Fighting snakes and playing 7 inches, the Queen Mother is really difficult. Shuexiuzhua fell off the account book and squeezed a voice between his teeth. Enter the palace. The author has something to say. 2 chapters in 1 2K novel reading network. Feng Quan knelt by the couch and tasted all the medicines that Li Jianting was about to enter. Feng Quan knelt by the couch and tasted all the medicines that Li Jianting was about to enter. Li Jianting was pale and sweaty on the edge, and trembled spontaneously while lying on the couch. She was covered, but seemed to be suppressed, with a slight whine in her throat with a sharp gasp. The doctors in the hall did not dare to be confused. He checked the veins for Li Jianting over and over again, wiped his sweat from time to time, and recounted the prescription to the people around him. Kong Yen once followed Hai Liangyi to face such a situation twice, but this was the first time after he was alone. His hands hidden in his sleeves were sweaty, and sweat was dripping into his eyes, and he did not dare to blink. If Chu Jun is gone. Kong Yen did not dare to think down. He labored to close his eyes and remembered the heavy rain in the Guangzhou case. How determined was Hai Liangyi to say that kind of thing? Teacher. Kong Yen could not help but grit his teeth. If the teacher is still good, he can't even speak at this moment, listening to Chu Jun's intermittent voice, and even develop a strong sense of weakness. Li Jianting's soup poured down, her eyes were still turning, and she seemed to be calmed by nightmare. Feng Quan knelt on for a whole day, and he boldly lifted Li Jianting's wet hair in the gap left and right by Gong Yi, watching Li Jianting's expression change. The catastrophe of this game is catfish. Regardless of whether Chu Jun can survive, the Gong Yi who is serving Chu Jun in the temple can't survive. Feng Quan was in a hurry to find his own way of life. His affairs had not been done yet, and Li Jianting could not die. His Royal Highness. Feng Quan whispered to Li Jianting because he was too close, so he saw a small hole in Li Jianting's earlobe. His heart was overwhelming, and he said, His Royal Highness is struggling from the Chu Pavilion of Qinlu, and is only a stone's throw away from the 9th 5-year reign. At this moment, his frustration will fall short. Your Highness. Li Jianting seemed to be inaudible, holding his fingers tightly against the bedding. She was lying in this splendid glory, but her heart was still trapped in the dirtiest Golan courtyard under the sky. Li Jianting had a choked throat in his throat, which was for mercy when he was beaten. God teased her and gave her such an identity, but let her be born as a girl. Those clanging earrings were mixed in the upset of the table and chair. She fell in countless times, dragged her hair to the stinky man. Xiang Yun is a good mother and knows how to make the best use of it. Ling Ting is a girl adopted by Xiang Yun, but she is not special. There are too many children adopted by Xiang Yun. Xiang Yun would pick up their chins and look carefully to determine their way. Ling Ting was born beautiful, but she didn't like it. Xiang Yun looked at her and found her eyes to be strangely unpleasant. It looks strange, but it's also fierce, Xiang Yun said, holding his cigarette. It's better to blind my eyes, so that you can have pity for the men. Ling Ting was thin and small, and Xiang Yun gave her food instead of really blinding her eyes, so Ling Ting was very grateful to Xiang Yun. She watched men in and out every day at Xiang Yunfang, waiting for the sisters in the hall. She didn't have a fixed master. She ran barefoot in the porch all day, brought tea and water to her sisters, and watched them apply powder and perfume. My daughter's house smells good. Ling Ting knelt beside the door, holding on to her puppet, sniffing the incense inside like a puppy. She looked at those voluminous ketone bodies covered with satin, watched those slim jade fingers wearing gold jade bracelets, and then listened to the sisters sing the words of the swallows, giving birth to her daughter's world. Xiang Yun was wearing a cloud-like shawl, and Fufeng Week Lu stopped beside Ling Ting. She drank wine, her face was thin, she smiled a few times, and bent over to pick up Ling Ting's face, and said, "Dog. Mom wears earrings for you." The gold thread fell on the pearl and slid down Ling Ting's auricle coolly, and finally fell on the palette. Ling Ting looked at Xiang Yun stunned. Xiang Yun had already stood up and walked with a smile. "Mom has a big guest today." The sister inside dumped Zhu Shi into the box, and said with great enthusiasm, "Where is the second son from the North King?" There was a giggle of laughter inside. Ling Ting didn't know who Li Bei Wang was or who the second son was. She carefully picked up the gold pearl, and fell quietly into her hand. In the evening, drinks were served in the hall. Ling Ting followed the girl and saw King Chu slanting on the couch, drunk. Several family members accompany, but Xiang Yun ignores it. She sits stubbornly by one's chair and looks dignified like every lady. Xiao Qie was wearing a Crow youth uniform, and this dress couldn't hold back his cleverness. He also seemed to have drank, sitting on a chair, and playing dice with his brother. Ling Tingho poured wine to the nobleman on the side, poured half a night drunk into a meal. Li Jianheng pulled Xiang Yun frequently to persuade him. Xiao Qie seemed to be having fun, but he never touched his sister. Li Jianheng sprayed the turbid wine and pointed Xiang Yun to Xiao Yun, saying, "This is me. My brother, Li Bei Wang's son. Have fought." He grinned. "Suan is real guy." Xiao Qie laughed loudly. He lowered his long finger, threw the dice into the golden bottle, and took a disapproval for casualness, saying, "The battlefield is smelly. How can this gentle home be comfortable? The second son is going to be drunk and dream here." Li Jianheng pushed Xiang Yun over, Xiao Qie slipped, caught Jin, and Xiang Yun fell into the arms of others. They vomited when they drank, and the rest was messy. Ling Ting remembered that her palm was still holding the gold thread earrings in that purring voice, and she saw the corner mirror exposed in the middle, and stomped her feet, and quietly traced the earrings on the earlobe to the mirror. The bright pearls shook in the shredded hair. It looked so good. Ling Ting thought like this, and suddenly heard the overturned sound of the drink, scared her to hurriedly close her hand, and found out that the second son from the north was still awake. Xiao Qie didn't see anyone. He was clearly in the dazzling bustling, but with a little distance. He neither went in, nor asked his sister to accompany him. His arm was still on the chair, his eyebrows were sharp, His eyes were sober, and he looked out of the north through the open window. Lingting backed out of the door, wiped the sweat-stained gold thread earrings, closed it close to her, and slept with it. Not long afterward, Xiang Yun remembered the gold thread earrings she had lost. Xiang Yun called Lingting to her, twisted her body while dressing herself in the mirror, and laughed suddenly, saying, "It's 12. Li Jianting vomited all the medicine in his throat. Gong Yi in the hall brought clean hot water, and Fengquan washed the towel and wiped it for Li Jianting. Li Jianting was half awake before her eyes fainted. She felt the hot towel rubbing her lips, and the drops of water dripped like tears. Chu Jun does not wear earrings, but Ling Ting wears them. Livestock. Li Jianting's teeth lingered in pain. Livestock. Ling Ting wore an earring, and the beautiful gold thread flowed in her tears. She struggled to break free, but was dragged back again and again. She cried and was scratching her head, hitting her forehead in bruises. "Let me go." Ling Ting sobbed, her face raised with tears. She stared at the closed door, trying to find a glimmer of life there. "Mom!" Ling Ting yelled, "Around me!" The only answer was her applause. Livestock. Li Jianting's trembling fingers made the quilt wrinkle, her chest undulating, and she knew who she was in the endless cry. She was a domestic animal. She was reduced to a sacrifice from the moment she was born. She was abandoned in the dirtiest place in the world and eventually got stuck in a narrow space. None of them have escaped this fate. They are all domestic animals slaughtered by humans. Ling Ting raised her hand and smashed the gap with her broken nails. "How did you create a girl? This body is disgusting." Ling Ting madly cracked the gap, roaring outside in the marks. "Mom?" She hated, "Kill me! If you let her live. If you let her live like a human." Ling Ting leaned against her forehead, crying and laughing at the eardrops on the ground. She killed herself, peeled off this layer of flesh, abandoned everything the girl had, to fight, to bite, and to get back what she deserved. Just give her a chance. His Royal Highness. Fengquan watched Li Jianting vomit again, and couldn't help raising his voice. The outside doctor had stood up. Kong Yan's heart was cold. He stepped back hurriedly, and was held by Tsinyu. If so, Kong Yan could hardly open his teeth. The curtain lifted up. Su Shuexiu's breathing was not yet calm. He heard the movement in the inside, and understood what Kong Yan hadn't finished saying. However, he is not a doctor who can rejuvenate, and there is nothing he can do about it. The atmosphere in the hall was dignified, and the courtiers did not even dare to come out. Gong Yi took the medicine in and out, and Fengquan kept feeding the medicine to Li Jianting. Li Jianting murmured to herself. Fengquan couldn't understand what she was talking about. She could only kneel and lie down, close to Li Jianting's lip. Defects. Li Jianting's lips fluttered. Suddenly, Fengquan's eyes were soaked with sweat in the dim hangings. He covered his mouth and said softly, "His Royal Highness is the true phoenix of the world. As long as you bite this breath, you will be able to meet the evil." Li Jianting's rapid breathing was interrupted. She seemed to finally hear what Fengquan was talking about, and her throat sobbed gradually. The soup was poured as much as possible, and then it came out of the mouth and nose. Gong Yi burst into tears in a panic, and Fengquan ignored it. Anxiously still in the cell, Liang Yingshan ate a pot of tea and stood outside waiting for news. The stars above his head were bright, and he couldn't help admiring the moonlight of the compound, and heard the dense footsteps from outside the compound. "What is this?" Liang Yingshan watched the 8th Battalion come in, and could not help taking 2 steps. The headed man raised his waistband and said, "The ticket of the Ministry of Justice said plainly that the capture of Pan Xiangjie, but you dared to fake public money. Our governor is the queen of the Empress to go to supervise the case, and not let it go." Liang Minshan knew that this was the key moment. He released Han Yen, and Pan Xiangjie and Pan Yen could not keep it. As soon as he gritted his teeth, he raised his chest and said, "I am here to review Han Yun by the orders of Chu Jun and Yuan Fu." Without Chu Jun and Yuan Fu's tickets, I will never let them go. The man approached a few steps and said, Chu Jun? The Lord of the world today is the Queen Mother. Liang Yenshan stared at it, watching the 8 major camps menacing. He stepped back and said, What else do you want to do? I have mixed in the masterpieces of Zhonghua. We blocked the city gate. The man hung the waist card back to his waist. Of course, I need to check it carefully and search the hospital. The 8 major camps all carry knives, and this search is obviously not that simple. Liang Qiaoshan understood it instantly. The dancing case was too tight. The Queen Mother jumped off the wall and could no longer tolerate them. But the official of the imperial court. Liang Yishan retreated in front of the blade. The 3 ministry officials who took the case backed away. They were all civil servants and could not stand such intimidation. The old dream of Nanlin hunting ground in Xianda's year came to mind, and officials were already feeling the wind and rain. The commander-in-chief is still in the capital, so you dare to look at it like this. Liang Yunshan has retreated to the door of the cell and swindled. The 8 camps at the door immediately drew their swords, and they looked around in surprise. Qi Zhuin's relatives went to the battlefield, and thousands of Qidong's garrison soldiers stood outside the city. Tonight, they just want to take advantage of Chu Jun's critical illness to kill the courtiers under the pretext of Zhong Bo Shi. After dawn, Qidong's garrison will be unable to return to the sky after entering the city. Liang Yishan took the opportunity to retreat into the prison and fasten the chain inside. He opened his arms and squeezed the officials behind him, and everyone fled inwardly. The knife of the 8th camp was twisted into the chain and pushed the door into a bang. The man laughed across the door and said, Dog officer, do you think you can sit back and relax when you lock the door? Ignite. The innermost Pan Xiangjie hurriedly said, Stop! Don't set fire, don't set fire. The commander is still here, you can't burn all the fire. Liang Minshan held up the oil lamp and replied, It is deserved to burn the 2 corrupt officials and corrupt officials, but the fire will surely attract the attention of the garrison outside the city. When the garrison comes in, it will kill your party. The man outside pulled back the knife from the gap. His face was cloudy. The Queen did make an order not to alarm Qidong's garrison outside the city. Chu Jun is in danger, and when he counts it, it's all here now. There is no news in the palace yet. Chu Jun is mostly cold, so he calms down and looks a little pale. Master Liang, he said as he raised his hand to signal the following team to go around. You are now working in a household, and you watch Bai Huahua's silver flow in and out, but you still live in a broken courtyard, why bother? How about taking this opportunity to abandon the dark investment? There is a bright future in the future. Liang Yishan's chest throbbed, and he was happy to delay time with the other side and said, I'll just order Lulu, and I'll be content in the broken courtyard. It is better to be cool by leaning on a big tree, said the man, a Han's close friend, pacing, and said without hesitation, There are winds and storms outside, how many more stable days are there in Pudu? As soon as possible with a good master, only then can he continue to serve the court. Everyone is not the same. We are loyal to Tianzi, Dezhou, Li's Jiangshan. If we change to other people, then will the subversion be confused? The oil lamp on Liang Minshan's hand was almost exhausted. He said, I also want to persuade you to put down the butcher knife. It's not too late to wake up at this moment. When Chu Jun ascends the throne, I can remember your credit. The man said with a soft sigh, Since this is the case, then you can accompany Chu Jun for a while. His words were sloppy. Liang Yeshan heard the small iron windows on the wall being broken, and the 8th Battalion threw in a smoking straw pocket. The prison was filled with smoke for a while, and the officials coughed and cried with tears in their eyes. Pan Xiangjie even more determined that the Queen Mother would kill him, holding the railing in shackles and shouting in a cough, Chongshan, quickly open the door. Han Yen was also awakened. He knocked over the teapot on the table, wet his sleeves, and covered his nose and nose. Liang Zhishan was staggered and stood unsteadily. The officials behind him knocked down the tables and chairs. Everyone was gazing at the prison. After just a few moments, they stepped on the tables and chairs to pick out the iron windows and wanted to breathe. As soon as they came forward, the soldiers at the 8th Battalion waiting outside pushed their sword. "You are the promoted public servant in the Guangzhou case," said the man. Jin Wei, who came down to co-organize the account department at the time, was Shun Zichuan. "From this point of view, you are the largest detailed work of Zhongbua in Badu. You and Shui Yanqing are in a private reconciliation book, trying to trap Pan Shilang in jail. You just want to get rid of the water in the capital." Liang Zhinshan was indeed promoted by Shun Zichuan, but he and Zhongbua did not have anything to do with it. Whether he was in Jueshi or Huzhou, they were all business affairs, and even the letter with Shun Zichuan did not pass. Slander. The smoke was really life-threatening. Pan Xiangjie had begun to hit the door, begging in the middle of the cough. "Chongshin, open the door quickly and deeply." Not only was Pan Xiangjie unbearable, the officials around Liang Minshan could not bear it anymore. Everyone was forced into a dead end. Here, if they didn't see a turnaround, they would be strangled alive. Several jailers pulled the chains. Liang Yishan couldn't stop it, and watched the prison door wide open, and the people around him rushed out. He was stumbled, and before he could shout, he heard the screams of the officials who ran out and was beheaded by the 8th Battalion on the spot. Crazy. Liang Yenshan braced his wall and covered his face. "You're crazy." He was talking, slamming heavily on his back, and being turned to the ground from behind. Hanjua took a sip of Liang Yushan, covered his mouth and nose again, and said muffled, "It's you, the ant-affiliated party with ant colonies." It was only in the courtyard that new sprouts were rattling, and the wind scattered the papers scattered on the floor. Han Yan's black boots broke his pen, kicked the corpse on the side, and patted the dust on the robe in the smell of smoke and blood. Liang Xieshan was put out and the knives all reached his neck. His black hat had fallen off long ago, and now his hair was messy and panting, he said. "The Queen Mother killed Chu Jun, and it is not her in this world. You, the thief, corrupted me for 100 years. Foundation." He came from sadness for a while and couldn't say anything. Liang Yingshan thought that today would be undoubtedly dead. Who knew that there was a sudden whistle in the wind, and then the sky's sun rushed, and the glazed gold tiles of Bata Royal Palace flashed immediately. Qi Juin spurred the horse, opened his hoof with the hoof open, and held up a sign when Lima was on the horse. "I am ordered to be the Prince of Chu." She stared at Han Yan as the horse fell, to supervise the search of the capital by the army. Han Zheng didn't believe it. He smiled reluctantly. "Chu Jun is in danger. Where can I order the commander to do a job? I know that the commander is eager to save people, but don't pretend to pass the order of Chu." Qi Juin took out the transfer order from his sleeve and threw it into Han Shi's arms, saying, "Do you recognize the ticket approved by Chu Jun?" Han Zhu saw that the handwriting on the ticket was skewed. Obviously, it was a transfer order that was approved by someone holding Chu Jun's hand. He was quiet for a long while, and his mind quickly turned into a stunned situation. The city gates have been closed, and there are still 20,000 troops in the 8 major battalions. Qi Juin is lightly loaded into the capital, and there are only 2,000 accompanying troops outside. If they do it now, they still have a chance. "Before I leave," Qi Juin leaned down and Wuzhu slipped in the air, she said, "I specifically ordered my father at home to send someone to pick me up if he hadn't returned in half a month." Han Yan looked at Qi Juin's eyes tightly with his fingertips and said, "The commander has said the same thing in Nanlin hunting ground." "My head is not my own," Qi Juin laughed. "Always have a snack." The Queen was incapable of arranging the crowd to make the commander get what he wanted, Han Yinpi said without a smile, and tucked the order into his sleeve. "Whoever wants this ending." Liang Kunshan fell to the ground, took his black hat up, saluted Qi Juin, and said, "Thanks to the visionary of the handsome man, otherwise he will be afraid of blood flow today." Qi Juin didn't say a word. She watched Han Zheng backing off, and only then moved her hand that was pressed on Yun Xiu until Bada retreated out. How could she have any vision, but it scared Han Yun. Qi Juin's heart sank a little, and the 20,000 capitals were really tricky. The Queen Mother dared to act like this tonight, but it was also expected that they would avoid ratting, and would not dare to gamble with Li Jianting. Li Jianting's breathing was smooth, and all eunuchs Gong Yi in her temple were captured and jailed. Chu Jun's poisoning is by no means a trivial matter. Xue Xiuzhua has not been able to defend himself against the Queen Mother. The palace is beyond his reach. Kong Yen said outside the hall, "These eunuchs are all fighting eunuchs. If you are enraged in front of the master and are instructed by others, you dare to seek the life of the Son of Heaven. This matter must be investigated thoroughly, and they must be clear, and punish him." Kong Yi used to be in charge of the punishment department. He was very uncomfortable with his party like Pan Rugi, and was influenced by Hai Liangyi. At this moment, after drinking tea in his hands, he said to Xue Xiuzhua, "Since the dancing case was stolen and obtained, when the field is measured, the 6 books will be sentenced to see if there are any people involved." Xue Xiuzhua's spirit was refreshed, and he understood that this was to completely liquidate with the family, so he first said yes. Xin Yu on the side seemed to have something to say, but he didn't say it at this moment. The Battle of Ba Du just ended, and Shen Zichuan, far away from Duanzhou, received the news. Today's sunny day, Ding Tao and Li Xiong sat under the porch and threw the clean core into the puddle. Fei Xing couldn't take the medicine. Qiao Tianya directly twisted up the two of them. Ding Tao held his head and said, "Let's pick it up immediately." "I sat here and watched it for a long time," Qiao Tianya played him. "Is it 17 or 8 tower? Why do I look at you and still have milk?" There was peel in Ding Tao's mouth, and he was so awkward that he frowned and said confidently, "You don't ask me to do business, I can only sit here and eat seeds." "Have melon seeds," Li Xiong answered. Qiao Tianya gave a kick, and ordered them to rush to pick the fruit. He stood under the eaves and watched, and a guard said something, and he looked back to see that Shen Zichuan was drinking medicine, and Yao Wenyu was talking. Then he nodded to the guard and signaled to let go. Within a moment, Yen Heru came in joyfully. Every day his clothes are not the same, but they must be embroidered with ingots and copper coins, shining brightly, like a peacock striding across the courtyard. "Good command, congratulations, Gao Xing." Yen Heru, carrying his golden abacus before stepping up, glanced into the probe, and whispered, "How good is the monarch?" Fei Xing just came out holding the empty bowl, and looked at Yen Heru with a cold eye, saying, "Will you know if you go in and see? Hurry up, the prince is waiting." Yen Heru's dimples came out, and he stepped up to the side and said, "Of course I can see it. I think very much when I don't see the governor in a day." He smiled at Fei Xing and leaned back across the distance. Xing edged over and drilled in. "Prince," Yen Heru shouted affectionately, "I look forward to." Shen Zichuan's eyes seemed cold, and he looked at him from the window, letting him swallow the words back. Yen Heru quietly withdrew his feet, fearing fun. "Well?" Yao Wenyu sat on the side of the case and ate tea, but he did not look at him when he heard it. Shen Zichuan lifted the folding fan slightly and said, "Sit." How could Yen Heru dare to sit? He came here today to ask for sin. When he pulled down the chair, he motioned to Shen Zichuan to sit first. At noon at this moment, the unknown bird squatted silently between the branches. "The outside heats up a bit, it's time to sleep." Shen Zichuan ignored Yen Heru's flattering, and stood by the window, facing some light. The light wind passed against the cheeks, and the agate beads shook like nothing, like waves in the spring light. Yen Heru didn't feel a little bit good-looking. He only saw the eyes of the prince, and he didn't open his mouth to make him stand still. "Shen Zichuan." Yen Heru tried hard to run away, and his belly was slandering. Once he was afraid of him, he would feel that this beauty is a knife, and the more he saw it, the more scared. Strange! I heard that you are all in Chatan Xingtian, Shinzichuan said next to the folding fan with his fingers on his stomach. Did you hear any news? Yen-Haru had already prepared. Knowing that the prince was waiting for his own explanation, he immediately explained. Know what? How dare you not know? The prince, the 8 city granaries are fools, and the food inside made me long ago. It was sold to Luoshan and sold to Fanzhou, and the bandits loved to buy it. He said here, paused for a moment like he didn't know. Caillou didn't tell you this? Of course, Caillou didn't talk about it. Caillou worked as a coolie for Yen Yen in Chazhou. How did you know where the food he handled every year came from? Yen-Haru didn't even talk to him about the wind, and every time he scuttled by the Hezhou granary. Caillou only wants money, he doesn't delve into it at all. It is right to push everything to the dead. Yen-Haru bent his eyes. Hixin Lanzhou has the ability to reach the sky, and there is no way to bring Caillou back to life. This is also my negligence, and I forgot to remind you, Yen-Haru pretended to say. Punish me, Prince, I think there is nothing to worry about. He said so. It was true that he heard it suddenly. Anyway, they were doing business in the east, and they did not engage in grain resale later, and the previous thing turned the page. However, it doesn't make sense to delve deeper. What Shinzichuan was pressing at Zhongbua was the food price he raised. The Baking exiles fled to the territory of Zhongbua. Shinzichuan seemed to be thinking about something. He turned his head and continued to look out the window. He said, You have emptied the granary in Baking. This year's Mintian problem cannot be solved. The state is asking for food, and you are holding their lifeblood. Yen-Haru was still boasting about this, but he didn't dare to respond rashly, because Shinzichuan was so cunning and he couldn't figure out where to wait for him to fall into the pit. He said, I followed the governor to change my mind and not to do that business anymore. They had forgotten me. You used to hide the river in Qingxi to get food from Qingshan, which is different from the situation in the 8th city, relying on Shihongxian. A worm fell on the edge of the window. Continued. I only thought of this crop in the past few days. Tong Hongxian is also engaged in the business of resale of official food. You two met in Jueshi, how can he tolerate you? Tong Hongxian is a family sister, and a silver bank as a security. It is not unusual to eat in the officialdom. Yen-Haru wants to get involved in Jueshi official food business. It is too difficult for him to have a chance. Shinzichuan re-examined the list in Dunzhou and knew that Yen-Haru's bribe officials were all those who had resold the official grain with Tong Hongxian and those who were not clean in the copper mine. Full, so there are 8 city granaries. I happen to be, Yen-Haru grinned. The second fat man, relying on his own bank, picked Jushi so tightly. I can only find another way. Everyone wants to level the water. Naturally, this huge prophet is unwilling to be eaten by Sun Hongxian. The Sun family is already fat enough. The Yen family in Hezhou is just the opposite. Yen-Haru is young, and no one in the family can enter the family. The family can easily handle him. But this kid was too slippery, and he made a lot of money in the middle, throwing a little profit from the fly that he didn't see to the family, so the family still felt that they were paying dividends. After Yen-Haru was quiet in the hall, he didn't seem to notice the killing intention of Shinzichuan flowing in silence, put his hands up, and then said, After all, the prince is happy to see it happen. Shuexiuzhua is so fierce that he needs to start again. I measured Hakajoda. I do'n't even need to know that they can't make up for the tax loss. They forced the dog to bite the dog, and the monarch would win the capital without any effort. Shinzichuan turned aside and looked at Yen-Haru again and said quietly, I want to thank you. Yen-Haru's hair was straight, his dimples were shallow, and facing Shinzichuan's eyes, he said, That's my proposal. Shinzichuan said, Is this how it ended? Yen-Haru almost laughed, but he didn't dare, and he knew that Shin Zichuan would take advantage of it. But Yen Haru was fierce in his heart. After July last year, how much money did Shin Zichuan have withdrawn from him? Yes, business is valuable, but Yen Haru stares more. He knows he can make more. Not to mention the food business blocked by Shin Zichuan, the grain going to Chidong this year is a major bleeding, and the new port being built in Jueshi. Shin Zichuan is staring at him. But he also has a way to arrive. I heard that Yi was looking for a Master of Light last year. Coincidentally, the Master was picked up by my people in Huzhou last month. I rushed around this time, and wanted to tell Yi the news. Yen Haru dialed the golden abacus. Will the monarch? Shin Zichuan looked up slightly, looked at him, and smiled slightly. The author has something to say. 23 chapters in one, 1,000 words short to make up tomorrow. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. The scorching sun was burning, and the iron riding on the school ground was covered with sweat. The scorching sun was burning, and the iron riding on the school ground was covered with sweat. The bowstring sound of the overlord bow was creepy, followed by the target with 3 arrows, and the thick and dull voice rang in the school field. Xiao Qia lowered his arm and put his arrow back on. The new knives that the master wants are here. Chen Yang stood beside, carrying Xiao Jianya's quiver. In the morning, Xuanzi and I went to check the goods, and they were all good forged swords made by dying warriors. Xiao Qia raised his arm, stared at the target, and hit the bull's-eye with a bang. Chen Yang handed the arrow, and when Xiao Qia shot the empty quiver, he presented a scarf. Xiao Qia wiped his sweat, leaned on the sun, and asked, "Are you here?" Chen Yang looked back, looked at the Ingmen, and said, "It's time." At this time, at noon, the snow from the Sha Aryan camp flowed in the trench, and the ground was exposed to heat waves. There was a boundless withered yellow grass outside the gate of the Sha Aryan camp. Gujin supported the camp wall and saw the flying sand rising from the sky. "Open camp," the soldier on the side shouted. "General Guo is going to enter the camp." At the same time as the camp gate was rising, Guo Weili had taken the iron to the camp. He pulled off his helmet while stroking his horse, and drenched his soaked hair, waiting for the bridge in front of the camp to set up a bridge. The eagle brought by Guo Weili hovered in front of the camp, lingering. The eagle room in the camp was noisy, and occupied the top of the watchtower, staring at the new eagles. The atmosphere inside the camp began to change. The embargoes who had squatted at the roots of the wall to stand up and stood up, looking at the open camp door differently. Gujin didn't move. He met Guo Weili's eyes, and neither of them let him go. Guo Weili and Xiao Qia are not known to everyone. His stabbing in Tudalong banner was a stabbing between the two sides, and he repeatedly rubbed against the band army in the 3rd Sands Battalion. A paper order from Jiming put him under Xiao Qia's account. Xuanzi Yu came out of the account and stood far away, not wanting to suffer this twist. Guo Weili's current master will be Xiao Qia, which means that whether he can go to the battlefield depends on Xiao Qia. Gu Jin is Xiao Qia's guard, and it is impossible to turn over the formation of this matter. No one knows whether Xiao Qia will wear Guo Weili with small shoes or will transfer him away from the main team. Either way, it is not a good thing for the 2nd Battalion that has just been rebuilt. The pass bridge settled, Guo Weili drove the horse across the bridge, and led the team into the 2nd Battalion. Gujin walked down the steps, and stood half-centrally watching them come in. Xiao Qia didn't turn around. He put the retrieved arrow on the string again, and looked at the target intently. Boom! Guo Weili heard the sound of the target. He held the helmet with one arm, and saw the overlord bow shining brightly in the sun, and after turning around, he turned and dismounted. Chen Yang brought someone to greet him. Guo Weili handed his brand over. Chen Yang glanced over and looked up to him and said, "The original team can no longer be used. It must be dismantled in place. Register in Dongto's account. They make up the vacancy." "Hassan came a few days ago," Guo Weili said. "The battalion wall on the east side of the 3rd Battalion has completely collapsed. You should find a chance to report the situation, and it will need to be repaired by the warrior. Is Hassan carrying a trebuchet? Chen Yang clamped the booklet under his arm, and after Guo Weili nodded, he turned and shouted to the embargo on the other side, "Go call Meng Rue, and let him bring the warrior over." Chen Yang then, he looked at Guo Weili again. "I will immediately arrange the warrior to go to the 3rd Battalion to repair the wall. You first report military affairs to the 2nd Master." Guo Weili touched the missing tiger tooth with the tip of his tongue and turned to face Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie ignored it. He seemed to focus on the Overlord bow, and shot the target through. The weather this year from the north is unusual. It was only in mid-March that the battlefield became as hot as in April and May of previous years. Guo Weili didn't remove his armor. Standing here, he was soaked in heat and sweat, and his tide was so hot that he could twist the water and put it on him, accompanied by heat waves that made people irritable. Guo Weili wiped his face and suddenly blew his throat. Sha Weiying, Shangying came to report military affairs to the 2nd Master. Xiao Qi arrested, and finally the arrow did not shoot out. 4 days ago, Hassan raided the 3rd Battalion, and his right-wing Iron Rider was killed. The eastern side of the 3rd Battalion suffered heavy losses, Guo Weili said, stepping back. The above is the military service that General Zhua asked me to repeat. Don't let Xiao Qie reply after he finishes speaking, turn around and leave. Xiao Qie really wanted to wear small shoes for Guo Weili, and Guo Weili also and recognized. He had nothing to say, as long as he could. Before Guo Weili wanted to be complete, he flew an arrow in his ear. His ears clearly felt the aggressive edge. The arrow was nailed to the post a few steps away. If Guo Weili had gone too fast just now, this would be his head. Fuck. Guo Weili turned around for a moment and said ugly. The second man wants to kill me, he just gives me a good word. Xiao Qie held the Overlord bow with a stern look and said, Do you also know that I am going to kill you? Guo Weili, Gujin escorted the military rations to the battlefield last year, was attacked near Tudarong Banner, and crossed the swamp to return to the camp. You sheltered the patrol team in the account. He was executed without discrimination. You also removed his ranks, framed him to collude with the Sand Cavalry. All of the above. Should I kill you? Gujin took the arm restraint and walked down the stairs. Guo Weili was only for the sake of Xiao Jiming. Everyone knows it well, but Xiao Qie gave him a reason to come up with it, and that was what he wanted to do. Guo Weili threw away the helmet and said, Yes, I did it. You have to kill too. Gu Jin approached from behind, dragged Guo Weili's collar, and knocked him to the ground with a punch in the gap where Guo Weili looked back. This time the smashing was too fierce. Guo Weili felt that the remaining half of his teeth were also shaking. He wiped off the blood between his teeth and cursed. Fuck! Gu Jin waited for Guo Weili to stand up and kicked him according to his chest. Guo Weili rolled out, his face covered with yellow sand. He wiped the sand on his face fiercely. Gu Jin pulled him up and bent his elbow to knock him to the ground again. Guo Weili felt that his cheeks were going to be cracked, but he didn't fight back from beginning to end, leaving Gu Jin to beat him with blood. This is what you owe me. Gu Jin waited for Guo Weilefu to pant heavily on the ground, removed his arm restraint, and threw it around him, flatly, calmly breathing. You are now cleared. Not only was Guo Weili stunned, but even the sister-in-law you standing in the distance was stunned. Guo Weili supported his arms, vomited the blood from his mouth, and stood up staggeringly. Chen Yang threw the helmet to him. He felt that he was still scratching his head. Just passed by? He almost drew his bones to death. Gu Jin stepped back a few steps and said, Today you and I have written off your personal grievances, and you have something to say straight away. You are Irius soldier, I am Irius guard, and I will go out from Urbit in the future. My brother, when will this battle be fought and when will we part ways? All the pictures expected by everyone did not appear. The morale of Li Beibei was weak this year, and Gu Jin was the guard of Xiao Qie. He refused to let Xiao Qie lose the heart of the 3 battalions for this matter. Xiao Qia gave Gu Jin the power to deal with it himself. Gu Jinken would use this method to solve it, because he was a real man, and he couldn't play the insidious and despicable set. Guo Weili originally thought that he would be hurt if he didn't die today. Who knows the generosity of Gu Jin? He stood in front of him and felt that he was short, rubbing his bruises on his face, a little uncomfortable and a little admired. Bao shamed to humiliate his husband. Guo Weili usually eats alcohol and fights hard. He claims to be his husband and easily refuses to convince others. Gu Jin suffered such a shame and humiliation at Tudalong Banner, but today he was able to resolve the embarrassment of both sides in this way, not only avoided Guo Weili's punishment, but also won the heart of the three camps for Xiao Qi. Facially, he did so, regardless of public or private. Guo Weili was convinced. Xiao Qia raised his arm and held up fiercely, remembering in the wind the words that Dad was leaving. Gu Jin has done this, so that Xiao Qia walks more smoothly. He is telling everyone in the war. Yi is not intolerant. When it was dark, Guo Weili sat at the campfire to bake dry food. His face was mottled. Xuanziyu sat opposite the rice bowl. He glanced at Xuanzi and said nothing. There is rice in the camp. Xuanziyu drew Guo Weili's dry food. In the past, what was going on with the dry food? Guo Weili's empty hand shook like a cover, and he said impatiently, "You have a lot of shit, so wide? Don't you be too shameless, are you sorry?" Xuanziyu chopped 2 meals. Gu Jin said it was over. Guo Weili picked up firewood and set a bonfire. The embargo was playing hot on the opposite side, and the soldiers did not grow at all. Guo Weili was silent for a while and said, "The second lord killed Duanzhou Scorpion in Chashir Tianken? Still winning more with less." Sun Xiu gestured with his fingers. Guo Weili sniffed and said, "The main force is the embargo." Fart, how many people did the Forbidden Army go to? Xuanziyu and Guo Weili also had no brotherhood. He had been much coerced by him before and then said, "You can tell me something, where is the second elder?" "The third sand camp is the second elder back. When you cut off Hulu who killed you for half your life, now you are killing the Duanzhou Great Scorpion. After that, Eri still wants to use you. This is a measure. Do ent fucking. I never know what to do." Guo Weili threw the bonfire over Mars. He lifted the smoking wood stick and pointed at Yuziyu. The sister-in-law was not afraid of Guo Weili at all. Before, he was the team. He had no choice but to have a chance to go to the battlefield and became a grandson. Today, unlike in the past, he took back Duanzhou. Although Xiao Qia's tactics of adjusting tigers and leaving the mountain were among them, he did hit and how many people he used. There has been no victory this year. You have met with Hassan. Our Iron Riders are not as good as the existing boundary guards in the 1st Battalion. Sun Xiu set aside chopsticks. Can you win the Scorpion? You can't, Zhao Wei can, isn't it? It's not right to follow Yi? Don't I follow Yi now? Guo Weili was bad-tempered and rushed. How do you want me to follow? Run after Yi's ass? Damn, how did Iron Riding avoid the hammer? Absolutely, Xuanzi gave him a thumbs up. You guess it yourself. Guo Weili watched the sister-in-law leaving, and when the sister-in-law was almost buried in the night, Guo Weili suddenly stood up and cursed, "Lousy's food." Xuanzi ran away early. Xiao Qia looked at the new knife sent by candlelight. This long and thin knife needed to be adapted from the North Rail. He was in the formation of the 2nd Battalion and repeatedly thought about what he got in the Chashir Tianken. Chen Yang and Gu Jin over there entered the account, and Xiao Qi smelled milk. "Master, there is also the letter from the governor following the heavy weight." Chen Yang placed the letter from Duanzhou on a small case beside Xiao Qia. "Almost, it will be available by the end of April. Shen Zichuan was smashed out of Yinzixing, can you please?" When Xiao Qia thought of this crop, he thought of Li Du. He retracted the knife into the sheath and opened the letter of Shen Zichuan with one hand in the gap of milk tea. "Master eating is in Huzhou. Xiao Qia hesitated for a moment, looking at Gujin. How did Master Eating go to Hezhou? A new robe was put on Gujin's arm, and when Yen thought about it, he shook his head and said, how did a Master of Lanterns go to Hezhou? Travel around. That's really weird, Xiao Qia said inexplicably. People I didn't find 3 feet in the ground have fallen into Yen Haru's hands. Chun Yang closed the empty bowl and said, Yen Haru is greedy for fear of death. Zhongba was so messy last year. He wanted to find a master to save his life. Chun Yang's voice stopped, and the account was quiet for a long while. Xiao Qia was looking for a master of light. This incident has been heard since June last year. If Yen Haru had already fallen, why did he keep quiet and keep it down to now? I've been in the 2nd Battalion in recent days, Xiao Qia said to his letter. Gujin will go down tonight and go to Duanzhou to guard the prince. If the master arrives successfully, you will return. If the master does not arrive. Xiao Qia's eyes were dark. Yen Haru sneezed a few times, blew his nose with a papa, and rubbed his nose red. He sat on a chair and watched Yao Wenyu writing, saying, Mr. Yuanzhua is like flying eagles and rabbits, not only just. Yen Haru touted it, and at the end, smiled at Yao Wenyu again. Sir, isn't that melancholy? It's weird to sit here. When will the governor be able to handle the case? Every day is so busy? Be careful of your body, it's not good if you burn it. It's on the road, count the time, and it's almost time to come in a few days. At that time, please ask the master to show Mr. Legs. Bao Juner can make Mr. stand up again. Yao Wenyu's hook was broken in a stroke, and she could not see her life on her face, but looked at the paper with regret. Yen Haru tentatively looked at Yao Wenyu, lying on the edge of the table, and said, Mr. suffering this hardship, hate Shui Yanqing? How bad is he? It is better for him to join hands with me to set up the bureau. Hanging him in bad a corpse for a few days, Mr. Xie hated him. Yao Wenyu frowned slightly, put his pen aside and said, This move hurts Yin. Yen Haru showed a clear expression, saying, Mr. is a scholar, and the scholars pay attention to this. When doing business like ours there is no such attention. It is a fool to have revenge. Can make people happy. Yao Wenyu felt that he meant something and was ready to say something as he rolled his sleeve. Yen Haru raised his forefinger and quietly hushed. The quiet inside the house made the footsteps in the courtyard particularly clear. Shen Zichuan in the main hall seemed to have gone out, and stood under the eaves and listened to the person who came to the post to finish the speech. Qiao Tianyao originally stood by the side, heard a change of expression, and repeated, Turned? Flip it over. Jiniwei, who transmitted the message, wiped his sweat. Fun, the carriage is stuck outside Chazhou. Luo Mu has no time to send someone to greet him, and the cart has turned over. Fei Xing stepped closer and said hurriedly, Where is the master? Yen Haru, covering her mouth and rolling her eyes, said sadly to Yao Wenyu, God testify, this has nothing to do with me. I'll stay here, stay with my husband and the governor. His dear eyes were harmless, and there was flashing malice inside. It's over. The author has something to say. I am an hour and a half late, sorry, I am a bit stuck today, and I went out halfway. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. We sent people to meet the Chazhou border. The carriage in Hezhou has arrived. They were chased by Hezhou Yamen, and they dared not stop on the road. The carriage turned over the old road outside Chazhou City and fell into the ditch. Jiniwei hesitated a little, then said, It fell to pieces, no one survived. We sent people to meet the Chazhou border. The carriage in Hezhou has arrived. They were chased by Hezhou Yamen, and they dared not stop on the road. The carriage turned over the old road outside Chazhou City and fell into the ditch. Jiniwei hesitated a little, then said, It fell to pieces, no one survived. The guards in the courtyard were like chills, and only heard the sound of running water. The bamboo tube dangled in the rock, and the newly changed pool water washed the stone surface and washed away the remaining moss. Fei Xing's heart sank, and he immediately looked at Shinzichuan. Shinzichuan looked calm. He stood under the eaves for a moment and said, "Why should Huzhou Yamen chase a carriage?" When they passed the checkpoint, they showed signs and lied to be relatives of Yan's family, Jiniwei said. When they are absconding. What a coincidence, it seems that God is preventing the coach from reaching Zhongbua. Fei Xing didn't believe this coincidence. Qiao Tianya didn't even believe it. The people sent to meet this time were all elite. They said that the carriage was turned over, that is, it was turned over, and it didn't do anything. Hands and feet. It's interesting. Before Jiniwei answered, Shenzichuan had already predicted that the master of a lantern would be more fierce or less fierce, otherwise they could resolve it by themselves instead of reporting to Shenzichuan. If Yen Heru treats the master as a card, he is too eager to throw it this time, so anxious that it makes it difficult for Shenzichuan from the beginning to believe that he will actually hand over the master. Where does Yen come from? Shenzichuan erected a folding fan without letting Qiao Tianya speak. He rushed to the side hall and said, "It's so late, get ready." Qiao Tianya's face was so calm that he retreated. When Shenzichuan picked the curtains in, Yao Wenyu was out. Yen Heru was playing with his golden abacus with his feet on his feet. His mental calculation was not good, but the abacus was very powerful. The crack of the abacus sounded and the numbers in his heart would not be confused. What happened to the master of a lamp? Yen Heru poked out the last bead, leaned over when Shenzichuan sat down, and said to Shenzichuan across the table, "I'm listening." No one was waiting in this room. Shenzichuan poured a cup of hot tea by himself, and said with regret to Xiang Yana, "It turned over." Yen Heru said, "What's wrong? The master is okay, right?" I asked Wan, and specially sent a good hand from my family to follow. Instead of drinking tea, Shenzichuan pulled the porcelain plate over the table case and poured the tea in, as if sipping a cup. He shook his head lightly and said, "It was said that Huzhou Yamen was chasing after him, the carriage was panicking and fell into a river ditch, and everyone in the car died on the spot. Unfortunately, I am waiting for the master to continue his life this year." Yen Heru discolored slightly and said, "The master is gone?" Shenzichuan pressed the hot, empty cup between his fingers, looked up at Yen Heru, and repeated, "The master is gone." Yen Heru's eyes didn't have waves at first, but Shenzichuan looked at him. He gradually expressed his suspicion and said tentatively, "Man, I can deliver." Shenzichuan's fingertips were slightly loose, and the empty cup fell to the table, rolled a few times, and leaned next to Yen Heru's abacus. The lights in the room were all behind, covered by the hanging bamboo curtains. Shenzichuan did not speak for a while, and looked at Yen Heru with interest. No trace of concealment could be found on this face. Based on this, Yen Heru was better than Shi Hongxian. Shenzichuan laughed when he thought of it. He lowered the folding fan, leaned it on the table, and said, "Worry comes from heaven, how can you blame you?" Shenzichuan was not angry, but Yen Heru could not figure out what the monarch was thinking. However, he had a little understanding of Shenzichuan in the past 6 months, knowing that he could not wait at this moment, and Shenzichuan was the most eager to attack. As long as he was slightly relaxed, the prince might change his face. "The grandeur of a prince is the person who is the master," said Yen Heru. "I have seen so-called heroes elsewhere. No one is better than the prince. There is no master now. What can I do? Mr. Yuanzhu's illness is getting more and more serious, and it must be cured. The doctor is easy to find, and the doctor is hard to find." Shenzichuan seemed curious. "How did you find the master?" "Well, in Huzhou." Yen Heru's expression eased. "The governor didn't know, this Huzhou is the master's layman's home. Since I knew that the second master was looking for the master, he sent someone to stare. Who knows? The master really went back. It's a pity that I didn't catch up. If I come a few days earlier, the master should be in Duanzhou now." "It's impossible for people to wish," Shenzichuan said. "There is nothing you can do. But I know that there are several old doctors in Jueshi, all masters of Xinglin, who used to see Grandpa Guangqing in the past. Yen Heru lifted the empty cup. The name is not less than the master, and it is quite good in Shisanqing. Many senior officials are asking for a doctor. If the prince wants to see you, I will bring it to you next time? Shun Zichuan actually picked up the teapot and poured tea for Yen Heru. He said, "Is there a lot of consultation money? If tens of thousands of silver can make the governor happy, then it is nothing." Yen Heru watched that the tea was almost overflowing and raised his hand to block, saying, "I spend money to honor the governor, and I feel happy." I don't know where the night breeze leaked and wrinkled the tea noodles. In this posture, Yen Heru let out his voice lightly. I heard that Air set up a bureau in Erdu and wanted to besiege the governor, but ended up killing himself in front of the governor. Hey, the blood was all over the ground, too crap. Shun Zichuan didn't put down the teapot, with a smile. I can't stop myself from doing more wrongdoing. But look, said Yen Heru, the monarch is not a proper gentleman. He stretched his voice and giggled. I and Jean Jinwei from the government are both acquaintances. Tell me to surround me? The candlelight in the house swayed violently, and the courtyard was quiet, and the guards seemed to disappear. Yen Heru retracted his hands and was not afraid, and said, I haven't learned kung fu, I can't even embroider fists and legs, and the governor is going to kill me. Why bother? Yang Shanxue came out of the scabbard and gave me a knife on the spot. He said at this point. I patted my thigh, and it reminded me. I forgot that the prince can't get the knife now. No wonder the second grandfather tried every means to find a lamp, anxious to die. This little bastard. Fei Xing, slumped on the roof, took a silent sip. How can I be willing to kill you? Shin Zichuan put down the teapot. Qidong's military rations will be provided by you after April, and Liuzhou Port will also arrange for you. Who will do it for you without you? I expected that the monarch would not be willing to kill me. Yen Heru's finger cleverly knocked on the handle of the chair, leaning his leg. No way, I was so hard hitting it some time ago. Now it's okay, half of your net worth is on me. But can I tell the truth to the governor? I can't bear to turn my face with the governor. Where can I go next to find such a good and clever master of the governor? I'm really surprised at this light. If the governor is willing, can I give Mr. Yuan Zhuo more than 100,000 silver as a gift? It is important to be happy and to be happy to be alive. The atmosphere in this room seemed to ease, but unexpectedly, Shen Zichuan's words turned around and said, Master Yi Deng is dead early. Yen He looked at Shen Zichuan wryly with a smile on his face. That can't. If he didn't die, how could you leave it to me so easily? Shen Zichuan lifted his finger and rubbed the folding fan slowly, thinking slowly, what is the granary in the 8 cities? I wouldn't kill you if it was true. It's impossible to say. Shen Zichuan looked at him with deep affection and looked at him. Suen worked hard to find a master. When he really found some trace and found that the master died in your hands, that is the king of heaven. It's useless for me to ask for help, so you have to throw this hot potato away as soon as possible. Yen He did this to ask for sin. What kind of sin? The sin of the 8-city granary. Yi Du found Danqing, Shui Yanqing temporarily won from that game. Yen Heru knew that he would definitely be seized by the court, so at this moment he wanted to make a master of a lamp, and give Hezhou Yemen a poor chasing unwilling opportunities to make the carriage go logically. This card Yen Heru was unwilling to throw at all, but he had no best way to go. He is indeed a master found in Hezhou, and he has been imprisoned in the house since the beginning of the year, but he was really dead. This handle that could threaten Shen Zichuan instantly became a scourge of Yen Heru's death. Once Xiao Qia felt the trace, he had no chance to deal with it. Only by facing Shen Zichuan could he gain vitality by benefit. You're so smart, Yen Heru never praised, he squeezed his abacus. But since the prince is willing to sit here to talk to me, he is willing to open the internet. I just calculated the account and calculated it again. Zhongbolu, the prefecture, cannot afford the annual supply of military rations in the north and south battlefields, and the princes also want to restore the people's livelihood in the 6 states. I am different from Tong Hongxian, and the princes can't lack me. You are different from Tong Hongxian. Why do you compare with him? Shen Zichuan thought he was interesting. You are extravagant, wear gold and silver, embroider copper coins and ingots on your robes, and gold abacus on your neck. You love money all over the world, but do you really love money? Tong Hongxian also likes to put on stage, but it is far from this point. Compared with Yan Heru, Tong Hongxian is more like a family child. According to the savings of the two of them, Tong Hongxian can even be a good and thrifty son. But Yan Heru was the opposite. He bought and sold silver first. Instead of wanting silver, he was obsessed with the process of making money. The profit of Chazhou's grain was soaring, and the Yan family suddenly went up. Yan Heru expanded Xiaohu City in Dunzhou, and united the family to sell official goods. The money he earned could not be spent in his entire life. He followed Shen Zichuan. This was a good opportunity to wash his hands in the golden basin. He had lost sight of the previous sale and wanted to wash himself. As long as he honestly supplied military food and military battalions to the north and south battlefields, from time to time he went to the government to ask for peace and wait until the battle was complete. After the fight, Shen Zichuan really went up, and no one could easily move him for the credit of supplying military rations. When he changed, he was a hero, but Yan Heru refused. Because of this restlessness in his bones, he was able to come up with bold enough to think of such a new port. This kid is not unwise, but like his name, he is a child prodigy. He is too smart to be able to play all kinds of tricks. Didn't everyone be played by him in the same way? He is still picking up money behind his ass. No matter what authority you are, he is not afraid. Yan Heru, holding a golden abacus, slumped on a chair, laughing in a dimple. After he laughed inside, he said, "Fun, what are you doing to be the Lord? Why do you do business, then I will not be lonely." Shen Zichuan also sighed and said, "I didn't have a good time." Yan Heru tilted his head and said innocently, "I haven't had a good time. If I were born 20 years earlier, what's the matter with Hong Hongxian? Dead fat man is so stupid that his family's top card was played by him. It's rotten." He raised his chin a little proudly. "I see them swapping the emperor for their turn, and I want to play a few more." Seeing that Shen Zichuan had no intention of killing, Yan Heru took a bite of tea and finished his throat. Then he said, "Let us admire the princes, but we always have something so different. Not the same. You know me, mother? Huzhou fisher girl was born, she ain't eat enough at home, but she also needs to raise waste brothers for her father and mother. My mother was annoyed, scrambled and ran away. The brothers of the state and worshipped the brothers expanded the initial tea sale. Everyone was homeless, and when they negotiated, they were all surnamed Yen. It's so good, you have the money at hand and do whatever you want." He laughed again. "Other people as family is na Xiaoshuan, my mother is a pick and send gentleman, she loves all the good-looking men in Huzhou, and my father is the most handsome one. But my mother died early, and my father became Uncle Yen, and did business, but those who timidly shrank and were afraid of everything. They didn't even dare to lift their heads when they saw the shopkeeper. Yan Heru was literate and had read the sage books, but the kindness, morality spoken there could not be far from him. Do'n't all those who talk about righteousness die early?" He became more and more determined in the later days, that is, how long to live without worrying, as long as he is happy. He seemed to be scared of everyone. He snored as soon as the knife was crossed, but the business he was doing was a business that anyone who really took the knife might not dare to do. What money does Zhongbo make? Yan Heru knows too well. He saw the refugees everywhere when he was passing by the carriage, and was pitifully dead, but what does this have to do with him? He just played in this troubled world. Someone really starved to death. He couldn't find his head. There were more people standing in front of him. What's wrong with him? Yen-Haru lay on the edge of the table and repeatedly asked Shin Zichuan, "What is wrong with me? It is not my fault that the Chinese soldiers are defeated. That is Shin Wei's fault. Sell the grain. I do and do it. Others have to do it. Instead of letting others spoil the money, it's not as good as if I used it to build a mutual market. It would be the most boring to hide the silver in the silver vault like Chang's. Shin Zichuan was going to kill him. Is he wrong to hide the headlight master? It's just that the master didn't hold it. Yen-Haru said, according to the life of the master, I will not accept him. He will die when he is old, or he will die in the wilderness. Yen-Haru is too young. In some places, he is as naive as he looks. He is not taught by no one, but by those who teach him. He called Kai Yu a grandfather. Kai Yu was a Chaozhou bandit, but Kai Yu also preached morals in his early years, and generously provided for the old and weak women and children in the country, and eventually followed Yen-Haru's ambiguity to buy and sell. People in this world love to talk about morality, but they all talk about it. Yen-Haru jumped out of his chair and held an abacus. Benefits are money, money is spent, and everything is spent. I don't care about this because I make more money and I can't play any business. The room was a little quiet, and Yen-Haru thought that Shin Zichuan was too silent. He calculated and said to Shin Zichuan, the master of a lantern, since the governor has to settle accounts, there is no way. I have a chess move and I am willing to make up for it. You look at the medicinal materials needed in the house, even if you speak. Chidong, I will continue to deliver military rations this year. Have we uncovered this? Shin Zichuan looked at him and said, go back. Yen-Haru settled in place for a moment, as if to explain to Shin Zichuan, and said again, the port of Liuzhou is at the core of the eyes, the governor. I will visit again the next day and show you the charter. Shin Zichuan was silent. The candlelight in the room was dim, and he was a little scared for no reason. This is different from his previous fears. It is infiltrated into the cracks in the bones, and it is cold. He knew who Shin Zichuan was, and Shin Zichuan wouldn't kill him. No smart person would do that. He had the confidence. Yen-Haru stepped back a few steps to the door, smiled at Shin Zichuan, turned around and opened the curtain. There was a girl waiting under the eaves, and Yen-Haru looked at the lamp, pale, and he panicked. The candlelight in the room went out, and the courtyard was silent. Yen-Haru didn't let the girl-in-law send him. He snatched the lantern and walked under the corridor, walking faster and faster, as if chased by something, and finally ran away. He panted and ran for nothing. At this moment, he had to admit that he was still afraid of death. Chidong 800,000 silver me, I have. Yen-Haru heard the footsteps on the ground behind him. He turned back in a panic and saw nothing, but he cried as if he had broken the vase. Little child, aggrieved by the trivial mistake, he shouted, Shin Zichuan. Sitting in a chair, Shin Zichuan spilled Yen-Haru's unfinished tea, just like the cup he poured to Yun Hongxian at first. The tea leaves were dried on the urn and quickly dried. The author has something to say. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network. Fei Xingshan was quite meticulous. The guards washed off the blood in the corridor with the fastest speed, but there was only one tea before and after. When Fei Xing lifted the curtain, he saw that the prince was closing his eyes, and he let go of his voice. Master, dispose of it. Fei Xingshan was quite meticulous. The guards washed off the blood in the corridor with the fastest speed, but there was only one tea before and after. When Fei Xing lifted the curtain, he saw that the prince was closing his eyes, and he let go of his voice. Master, dispose of it. Shin Zichuan seemed to be awake, and his half-concentrated eyes stared at the candle that was about to burn out, and it was difficult to get close to sitting there. After a while, he said, Where has Gujin been? It's time to come to Luoshan tonight, Fei Xing said. Shun Zichuan seemed to be awake, said, with a nasal sound and said, "Let him go back." Fei Xingdan knelt at the door, paused for a moment, and didn't dare to say too much, and looked sad, saying, "He took the letter from the second elder, Lord Luoshan is not far away from us, Duanzhou, it won't take much time." Shun Zichuan was having a bad mood tonight, and he didn't talk. Fei Xing shut up immediately and retreated honestly. At the time of the two fragrant incense, Qiao Tianya pushed Yao Wenyu to arrive. When the bamboo curtain was opened and closed, Shun Zichuan said, "Why didn't Yuanzhu rest? It's so late." Yao Wenyu held his book and loosened his hand, covered the thin blanket and said, "Without Yen Heru, the shop in Huzhou is going to be messy. The prince wants to deal with it alone tonight, may as well listen to my humble opinion." Yuanzhu was good at talking before, his voice was like a spring, soothing, and very nice. Shun Zichuan tilted his head and said, changing tea from the lantern. The maid came in to remove the tea-soaked puppet, and replaced it with a new lamp, so that the house finally lit up. Fei Xing specially asked the maid to soak the tea to refresh the prince and gentleman. Killing Yen Heru, the shop in Huzhou will be chaotic for a while. Without killing Yen Heru, the business in the world will be chaotic. Shun Zichuan did not drink tea, and he held up his spirit. Besides, Yen Heru was so sure I would not kill him if I obey his wish, I will have endless troubles. Shun Zichuan had no patience with the naughty boy. When Yen Heru raised a master of lights, Shun Zichuan arranged the results for him. Shun Zichuan can be fooled, but not coerced. In fact, Yen Heru didn't understand Shun Zichuan or Xiaoqie at all. He knew nothing about who was the scabbard among these two people. In addition, Xiaoqie was so anxious to find a master because he had just experienced death. As long as Shun Zichuan thought about Su An's mood after hearing the news, he did not plan to let Yen Heru live for a moment. After waiting for the maids to retreat, Yao Wenyu said, Yen he didn't follow this behavior and left his confidant in Huzhou just to make the monarch jealous. As Yen Heru himself said, he couldn't even embroider fists. He dared to enter the room and threaten Shun Zichuan. His confidant stayed in Huzhou. If he didn't return home as scheduled, Yen would cut off the bottom of the Huaizi Tea business road and shut out the Zhongbua caravan, so that Shun Zichuan could only pass through Huaizhou, detour to Wuqing, then pass through Yongyi Port, and finally reach the depths of Jueshi. This road is not only time-consuming and labor-intensive, but also has to deal with the checkpoints along the way. Businessmen in the world are all good for each other, said Shun Zichuan. Zhongbua is a transit point between North and Qidong. Yan's judgment is not just my business path, but also the business path of the merchants who have already invested in it. These people, after trying Zhenyu and letting them go back to eating wild vegetables, no matter what the taste is, they will not agree with their full stomach. Shun Zichuan and Yen Heru are different from the bandit. He has serious authority in the east. It is by no means comparable to Kai Yu and Lei Jingyu. He can finalize the tariffs in the two places in the east, and firmly hold the three important places of Luoxiaguan, Hushi and Dengzhou. Yen Heru wants to coerce him by business alone, and it depends on Shun Zichuan's unwillingness. This year, China Bo also needs a large number of defense arms. Shun Zichuan cannot produce his own equipment. The copper mines are all on the west. Those merchants who sneakily sold official copper were in their hands last year. At this moment, their eyes are red and can't wait. I want to catch the boat of Zhongbua. There is no need for the monarch to knock on the door, as long as the monarch talks about doing business. These people are willing to travel thousands of miles to sell goods. You must know that Liang Keishan and Qiangshan are now under strict investigation. These official coppers are then pressed in the merchant's warehouse. Once traced, they are dead. It is only Shun Zichuan who can eat so much in one bite. Qi Dongjun Grain Shun Zichuan is not worried. Shun Zichuan took out the shop of the clans at first, relying on the Dan and Guqingqing, took some effort. Because the clan is a family, and pays attention to the inheritance of the surname, he left the old lady without killing. But Yen's is not. Yen's family started by taking tea, and the brothers of the rivers and lakes who worship the handles have a love in Yen Haru's generation, but this generation of Yen Haru is the capable one. Without Yen Haru, there is no mess. Brothers are willing to talk to the monarch. Chidong's military rations don't even need Shin Zichuan to open his mouth, and some people supply it for him. Yen Haru is important, but he is far less important than he thinks. The port of Liuzhou is all dominated by Yen Hayu, Yao Wenyu said. We don't really know the details of it, but Jueshi and Luo Dan are doing business for Fujian. Let him send a few people to do the business. Don't worry too much. Right now the amount of silver needed at the port is not small, and it is borne by China Bo alone. I am afraid it will be difficult to continue. Shin Zichuan heard the words and said, What does Yuan Zhua mean? Sooner or later, the princes will return to Pudu. By then, the merchants in the world will still be the princes of the princes. Yao Wenyu said. After a little coughing, he continued, The establishment of the port is also everyone's business. The batch of money is left to the merchants to let them fall in love. In the future, as long as the prince expands Liuzhou and adjusts tariffs, they will be the money bank of the new dynasty and the money bank of the prince. Not only that, Yen Haru has a good idea to build a new port in Liuzhou. The bay can moor enough ships. The rise of Liuzhou and the towns around Liuzhou is in sight. This is a fertile field to be reclaimed. As long as traders are not stupid, they will be happy. Follow Shin Zichuan here to divide. Yao Wenyu can even imagine that by that day, the family Shun has cleared up, and the world will begin to rest. Liuzhou will become the first major port of Shin Zichuan that penetrates the southeast, and even the first major port connecting overseas. That day, Yao Wenyu covered her lips sharply and coughed violently. He smashed the tea in a hurry. Hot tea splashed on his blanket and wet his legs. Shin Zichuan had stood up, caught the teacup, and leaned down and called, Yuan Zhua. Yao Wenyu didn't finish talking. He had so many words in his chest, but was blocked by a cough. While covering his mouth and nose, he raised his hand to signal that it was okay. Fei Xing. Shin Zichuan saw the blood soak his wide sleeves, and immediately drank. Call doctor. Fei Xing outside answered and shouted. When Qiao Tianya heard the sound of dang-dang, he felt bad and waited for Shin Zichuan to call. He had already entered the curtain. The author has something to say. Too few today, tomorrow double. Gujin received a letter from Duanzhou in Luoshan. He was about to go on horses and continue to run. After reading the letter, his expression was complicated. He turned around and asked Huo Lingyun, who was on the way to adjust horses, Do you believe it? Gujin received a letter from Duanzhou in Luoshan. He was about to go on horses and continue to run. After reading the letter, his expression was complicated. He turned around and asked Huo Lingyun, who was on the way to adjust horses, Do you believe it? Huo Lingyun pulled his horse, nodded his head, unscrewed the water bag, slammed it, and said, It was written last night. Gujin received the letter in his arms, took another one, and handed it to Huo Lingyun. This is what Iri gave to the prince. What did Jiniwei, who went to investigate the carriage, say? It is said that Heman Gaomen reluctantly pursued the driver, and drove the driver into a ditch along the disrepaired road. Huo Lingyun hung the water bag back, and carefully received Xiaoqia's letter. Here, several people went down to Hegu and checked for 2 hours, but they didn't live. Gujin's expression became more and more ugly. He was ordered to come over, in fact. He wanted to be a good master of Xiaoqia. However, the master was gone. Gujin stood in place, puzzled, and said to himself, What is the master going to Hezhou? Isn't that his layman? Huo Lingyun ran a horse all night, all sweaty at the moment, he said. According to Yen Haru, the master was sick and died. If he had planned to live soon, you should also go back and meet your relatives. The master broke off the dust when he became a monk. The rest of his family are all relatives, not biological brothers. Gu Jin said here, remembering dying, and continued, moreover, the master made an appointment to return to dying this year. If he had decided that he would live shortly, he would fulfill the agreement first. Huo Lingyun had not dealt with a master of lights. He looked at the sun and said, I have almost rested and it is time to go on the road. Gu Jin took the horse to give way, and after Huo Lingyun turned his horse around, he said to Gu Jin, You have arrived at the battlefield. Remember to tell the second grandfather that Huantai Tiger also wants to try his new knife. Gu Jin didn't respond, but said, Let the tiger write to Iri himself, I won't go back to the battlefield. He cleaned the mud on his boots, turned his horse, and pointed his whip at the other end. I'm going travel to Huzhou. The eaves were full of doctors, and they were all embarrassed. Fei Xing saw that this place was not a place for discussion, and hurriedly arranged the doctors to go next door. Kong Ling didn't go in to disturb Yuan Zhua, followed Fei Xing, and asked, What does the doctor say? Fei Xing glanced at the still bamboo curtain, raised his arm and led Kong Ling to the side, and whispered, They are all very scared. The prescription is not as good as our Jin Wei opened it himself, and he dare not give him heavy medicine. Although Kong Ling is widely involved, it does not have pharmacology. He looked faint, fixed Su and said, Then? Fei Xing couldn't say. Previously, everyone had pinned their hopes on a master of lights. Yen Haru caught everyone by surprise. He avoided the new shoots and only said, The prince wrote a letter to Guqingqing last night, asking them to find a doctor in the 13th city of Jueshi, and they will be able to go to Duanzhou after June. But how do you cook these 3 months? Fei Xing didn't dare to make rash remarks. He watched the doctor come in and out last night, and he was still worried. Yao Wenyu usually held up. He used up energy when he came to Cizhou to appease the famous celebrities of Shenzichuan. At that time, he and Kong Ling and other people negotiated the arrangement of the Liuzhou Yemen overnight. Later, he went from Cizhou to Duanzhou. The state hasn't seen it well. Kong Ling stood for a moment and solemnly said, Wait and wait, I will give a message to the governor. The governor did not sleep all night, and is still waiting for news in the hall. Then you have to persuade my master. Fei Xing was frightened by Yao Wenyu's coughing blood, and chased Kong Ling a few steps. I heard that the master was gone yesterday. I do'nt think the master is very energetic. Now I will do it for Yuan Zhua. Do'nt be ill, sir. Do'nt be ill. I am watching with Xiao Tianya here. Nothing can happen. Kong Ling responded hurriedly, leaving the yard with a robe. When he arrived in the courtyard of Shenzichuan, he saw Fu Junjing standing under the eaves and listening to Ding Tao's speech. When Shenzichuan saw Kong Ling, he nodded and motioned Ding Tao to stop first. Ding Tao has been very good since the time he hit Dunzhou. He shut up immediately, backed to the side, and gave way to Kong Ling. Kong Ling considered the words carefully, saying, Just after falling asleep, the courtyard is boiling medicine now, and Xiao Tianya is standing by the side, and the monarch does not have to worry too much. The hospital was clean, and Shenzichuan walked down the steps and said, Did the doctor have an exact word? Kong Ling looked at Shenzichuan with a hesitant look and followed him, saying, These doctors are all Yamanolang. I have never seen a person like Yuan Zhua. Naturally, I dare not fool with ordinary prescriptions and speak very cautiously. With all your heart, no one dares. When Shenzichuan was so keen, when he heard what Kong Ling said, no one in this group of doctors could treat Yuan Zhua, so he dared to join up with his nurses and try his best to avoid risk. Send another urgent letter to Yu Shao, Shenzichuan stayed. Let him pay attention to the doctors in the states when he inspects the states. All that he can find will be sent to Duanzhou. The consultation fee will be taken from my private bank. Kong Ling also stopped, and when the guard from the other side came to deliver the letter, he didn't bother Shenzichuan to read the letter. Shenzichuan flipped through the letter and saw Guqingqing's private seal on top. He opened the letter, read it, and handed it to Kong Ling, saying, "The battle for the capital city is over." Kong Ling looked at Xiao Jin and said, "The commander is not short of military rations, but the title of the knight. The queen can see it clearly, but she still has to force it, but it helps Shui Yanqing." "She is riding a tiger," Shen Zichuan said. "I want to use Qi Juin in my heart, but I really can't take out any more chip. I really want to fight. Han Yan's 20,000 army can't win." At the time, Shen Zichuan said that the situation of far distance and close attack had long been reversed, and the fatigue of Badu was obvious. They faced East China Bow, and only 8 camps to the north to rescue the emergency. Danqing Mintian again got to this point. There was no military defense at all. Qi Juin is the life-saving straw for Badu. When Kong Ling saw the last, he gasped slightly and said, "Pan Xiangjie and Pan Mao are dead. The queen is now Shui Xiuzhua." Shen Zichuan looked at the sky, as if there was rain. "How can I retreat all over? It's raining, this is the beginning of the rainy season. The cabinet has to hold Han Yan accountable. The officials who killed the 8 camps in jail are all Chinese bloggers." Both sides scolded each other in the court, and Pan Xiangjie's death was presented at this moment. Liang Xieshan remembered it that day. Pan Xiangjie was locked in the innermost place, and no one took care of him when he called for help. At that time, everyone was outstretched, and he was smoked alive in the cell. He waited until the jailer cleared the cell. "The granary was opened by Pan Mao," Shui Xiuzhua said in Minglatang. "The current account details of the household are also accounted for by Pan Mao. This person's crime will not die." It was a pity that Sun Yu originally had a pity, and then he proclaimed, "It's not that he should be exempted from punishment. The punishment should still be punished. The law can't be broken, but it can be decided as appropriate." Kong Yin groaned for a while and repeatedly read the confession reported by the Ministry of Justice, saying, "Although Pan Yen was frank, that was what happened after the imperial court. He was an accomplice even when there was a problem with his account. The death penalty is unavoidable and the crime of living is difficult escape. In the end, the cabinet will delist Pan Pan and exile to Huaizhou. However, the Danqing case has not been closed for the time being. Panning has to wait at the post to be summoned." Different from the family members of Pan Xiangjie's generation, Pan Yen studied school as an official, regarded himself as a scholar, with a little pride, so he could not agree with Shweta. Today, his family has changed suddenly, from a family son to a scapegoat, and his father has died. He has been cold-shouldered in the post, and all the food he eats is cruel. Shweta and Pan Mao had a quarrel at Feng Hoyan in Shaoqi. In the spirit of visiting, he specially took Zhenyu to see Pan Mao, and wanted to release his suspicion before Pan Mao. The station's miscellaneous service led Shweta into the room. When he saw the room being forced, he asked the miscellaneous service, "Does Pan Qingji live here? Is he Pan Pan's son-in-law or a servant of the family? You just let him live there." "Here?" The handyman opened the door with the key and slidly said, "Isn't Pan copying it? He is a sinner, so the court arranged it. How dare the young men break it?" He pushed open the door and instructed, "Do and be too big for a long time, it will be accountable to the Ministry of Criminal Affairs." Shwedakian's thin body leaned around, probed through the door, and saw Pan Yen sitting by the window. The room was dark, rain was leaking everywhere, and the floor was soaking. Pan Mao's robe was tied, and his boots were tied. He was still wearing the one in prison, with some stubble on his face, and looked at him too much. Shweta held the food box, stepped into the door, and said softly, "Qingji, I'll see you." Pan Yen rolled his eyes, looked at him for a while, and said, "Sit." Shweta put the food container on the table, sat next to the chair, looked around and said, "Hello, how about you? I'll wait to go out and talk to them, and it will be possible to change rooms." Pan Yan's eyes turned red, and he was lonely, dripping with the leaking rain. Shweta was restless, moved a little, and took the initiative before falling into embarrassment. I'm here today not to see your joke. You are going to Huizhou, so far away this fair. I will never see you again in the future. I want to send you. Pan Yin was indifferent. Shweta was sentimental for some reason. He was scooping out, and Pan was scooping out, but how did he scramble for this? With tears in his eyes, he lingered for a long time before he said, "Come on, Feng Hoyen last year. Sorry. I heard you let go of Yuan Zhua, and I really admire you. You are talented and you are being at home when the side is bitter. Yuan Fu is willing to waive your death penalty, that is, to cherish the talent, and when you arrive in Huizhou, you still have the opportunity to fight again." However, Shui couldn't believe this. They were all people who depended on their families. Tian Shu had made such a big leap. When Pan Yu arrived in Huizhou, all the people scolded him and wanted to give someone a foot. Pan Yin was silent and said, "Be quiet." Shui was calm, and Yen Qing, who was with Shuezhua, had been raised by Mr. Shui. He hurried to answer. "I served as the servant of the Ministry of the Year, and the account book hesitated for a long time. After all, I didn't give it to the old man in the cabinet. Now there is Shui Yanqing." Pan Yin looked at Shui as if looking at himself who had a chance many years ago. The glory of the 8 cities is over. Shweta heard a thunder, and the explosion went on for a moment. He thought Pan Yi would give him some advice, but Pan Yi finally said, "You go." Shui Pingjing pushed the food box to Pan Yin and said, "I brought you something to eat." He also remained silent, sitting here until the rain gradually grew, and the outside clerks urged several times. Shui Pingjing got wet when he got up. He said goodbye to Pan Mao. Pan Yin stood up, straightened his dress, and returned a gift. Shui Pingjing didn't dare to look any further, turned around, and in that porch, he couldn't tell where to go. Pan Yin listened to the sound of footsteps and sat back at the table. He never touched the food box brought by Shui Pingjing, took the pen, and wrote the Chun Sin book squarely. This letter was not addressed to the court, but to Pan Xiangjie, a farewell between their father and son. Pan Yin wrote very long, as if he didn't know how to face his father. He cried a while writing, and then cleaned himself, lying on the broken mat, and never opened his eyes again. The author has something to say. "I have a chapter very late, you can come back tomorrow morning." Qiao Tianya leaned back in a rattan chair, biting a red thread between his lips, and deftly moving his fingers. The moonlight when it was ugly was thin, sliding over the side of his bridge of his nose, making his hanging eyes look lonely. Qiao Tianya leaned back in a rattan chair, biting a red thread between his lips, and deftly moving his fingers. The moonlight when it was ugly was thin, sliding over the side of his bridge of his nose, making his hanging eyes look lonely. The piano rests on the table, covered with silk, and has not been touched for several days. When Yao Wenyu woke up, he didn't say anything. He looked sideways at Qiao Tianya. Qiao Tianya is like a lonely month stagnating in the empty valley after a shower, clear and distant. The wanton wind became an old dream last night, leaving a shadow on him. Yao Wenyu still kept the glory of that day, but already knew that he couldn't reach him. This is the end of spring and March. Qiao Tianya took off the red thread and closed his tail beautifully. He reached over and touched Yao Wenyu's hand, and put the red thread on Yao Wenyu's wrist. Yuan Zhuyin hung in a drape, peering at the person close by through the gap. He laughed silently, but humped, the pillow was wet. Qiao Tianya did not open the curtain. They only passed the temperature between their fingers, as if this was the most intimacy, and it would disappear when they got closer. Yao Wenyu never spoke, as if he had never woken up. The next day when Shun Zichuan came, Yao Wenyu had already stood up. He leaned slightly towards Shun Zichuan, which was considered a salute. "Yesterday I was ill, and my work was delayed," Yao Wenyu said, picking up a messy chess piece. "It's okay today to finish the conversation with the governor." Shun Zichuan took a seat and said, "Your illness is only getting better, and you don't need to talk about it for half a month. Idle in the disease is also idle. Yao Wenyu pondered for a while, said, the port of Liuzhou is a top priority. Having a governor here is like having a place to speak in Jueshi. Yao Wenyu, Kong Ling, and others think different things. He looks farther. In today's intolerable situation, he is more willing to accept the talents of Shun Zichuan than to kill the entire Zhou Chaochen. The prince thought he was lacking a general. In my opinion, the opposite is true. Yao Wenyu put the pawns in place. In the future, the most important thing in the three realms of the East is the tyrant. Whether it is Sun Ziyu or Yantai Tiger, they can all be on their own. The generals will wait until the war subsides, with them stationed on the border, and the princes will have no worries in the East. The princes who will be lacking in the future will be capable generals. Although Qing Feng is good, he will not leave Zhongbua. Although Zhou Gui is loyal, he cannot take on the big task. After several years in Jueshi 13 cities, it still has not fallen into the hands of the family, precisely because there are Ningchenjiang's castle peak here. Shui Yanqing can make waves in the DPRK. Chu Jun is just an opportunity. The real reason is to support his hard-working faction. These people are not high-ranking, but they are the key to determining whether the reform can be carried out. It is necessary to reinvigorate Li's Jiangshan and reappear Yongyi Zt. They are far more courageous scholars than metropolis officials, and they are the last good ministers of Dezhou. Jiu Zhongtian is not good, and changing the dynasty means that countless scholars have to dream about it. To the point where the situation is so bad, neither Hai Liangyi nor Shui Xiuzhua moved to replace Li's idea, because it was comparable to the crime of his uncle. The monarchs, fathers, and sons form an ethical framework. For hundreds of years, Li has been the emperor. This not only represents the long-lived emperor, but also means that generations have followed an orthodox. If Shun Zichuan stepped into the capital again, the Fu Jun would defeat the towering orthodox emperor. He would need to have the monarch right granted by God to take off the hat of the random thief. However, this is not enough. He must use the appropriate way is to let Li's widow willingly drive him, otherwise, even if he has won thousands of miles, he will not be able to achieve the prosperity of the world that Qi Huilian once said. Shui Yanqing cleared the Bachengtian tax. It was a good thing, but he was too anxious. Hidu's current taxation is mainly on the Bachengtian tax. He has swiftly and revolutionarily removed the Danqing Pan family. Now there are only two ways. You can go. The first is to continue to investigate the remaining 7 cities and rebuild the fields at the fastest speed. The second is to slow down and give the remaining 7 cities the opportunity to pay field taxes. The former has to return the fields to the people, but the people of the 8 cities have already left their homes. He went to Zhongbua to re-register his household registration, which will delay the work of this year. In this way, the problem of eating on Wednesdays after the fall must be handed over to Jushi and Hezhou. The latter's tax and air losses were spread to Yaqing naturally, it must continue to spread to the people. The harsh policies are as fierce as tigers, and this is no different from the previous one. When Jushi is exhausted, the people in the 13 cities should not be able to eat enough. If the princes take the Liuzhou port as an opportunity to establish east-west waterways and connect the north-south roads, Hezhou and Zhongbua will ease the burden on Jushi. Yao Wenyu said here that the sun was already under the eaves. He held the chess piece slowly and said, "The prefect must have killed Yanheru, presumably he had long planned. Hezhou is next to Qidong." Shin Zichuan followed Yao Wenyu playing chess pieces. "This place is not included in the bag, I can't sleep at night." Yanheru thinks about business, but Shun Zichuan thinks about more than business. Qi Juin teamed up with Shui Xiuzhua in the Danqing case. Chu Jun was going to give her the title, and she will be the Marquis of Dezhou in the future. The Qidong 5-county garrison stands in the south of Zhongbua, and Shin Zichuan must hold Qidong's important line to the west. Hezhou is the only way through. Shen Zichuan was straightforward. If Qi Juin was to protect Li's family, then Dengzhou Zhongbua was the key to Shen Zichuan. He had to hold Hezhou, which is more important to Qidong, before sitting with Qi Juin at a table. Qi Xiu is old, and Qi Juin is far more suitable as commander than others. Shen Zichuan went on to say, Lu Guangbai stays away from the north, he just doesn't want to be a big general. Qi Qin leaves the border county, Qi Juin has to make up for himself. If she wants to be an escort, she has to run. Qi Juin may really run past, so Shen Zichuan blocked the road. The big commander has been trapped by money in recent years, and this time when he was willing to send troops to the mouse team, he was also examining the situation. Yao Wenyu coughed gently. Shen Zichuan stopped mentioning official duties, saying only, Qiao Tianyao is now in charge of Jinichi and staying at school daytime is unavoidable. I wrote to Master asking him to come to Duanzhou to take care of you. Yao Wenyu didn't refuse. He wiped his mouth with a parchment and said, It's so far away, Master Hard makes a special trip. Shen Zichuan watched Yuan Zhua hang a red rope between his wrists, and concealed his sleeve as he raised his hand. He didn't ask, and saw that the slave was awake and was walking through the door. I am all from the same place, Shen Zichuan said. I used to hear from Shi Hongxian that you will return to the capital every spring and March next year, or a few years later you can take a good look at the spring scene. Yao Wenyu knew that Shen Zichuan was comforting himself and smiled slightly. He didn't answer this sentence, but said, Since the dancing case is about to end, where did Pan Mao go into exile? Shen Zichuan hung a folding fan to block Hu Nu and said, Kong Yen will exile him to Huaizhou, but he went on a hunger strike in Badu Station and committed suicide. Yao Wenyujing sat for a while. Pan Yen was very proud of his youth and his career was smooth. At the beginning of the feast, he had a conversation with Shueshui and ended up starving to death. He is tired of his family and is finally free now. I am all home. Yao Wenyu looked at the courtyard. But there is nothing more worthy of him to go back and watch. The author has something to say. I am too sleepy to type with my head. When Pan Jian died, Li Jianting had just turned into danger, and the eunuchs serving in the palace were too late to cry and were taken to prison. Chu Jun was poisoned. The wine and vinegar noodles were immediately sealed up and all eunuchs were sent to jail. Based on the days of Emperor Tianqian, Fu Man came to take charge of the case and tortured them severely. When Pan Jian died, Li Jianting had just turned into danger, and the eunuchs serving in the palace were too late to cry and were taken to prison. Chu Jun was poisoned. The wine and vinegar noodles were immediately sealed up and all eunuchs were sent to jail. Based on the days of Emperor Tianqian, Fu Man came to take charge of the case and tortured them severely. Ancestral ancestor. Xiao Nei couldn't stand the beating, crying on the stool, Ancestral ancestor. Fu Man was wearing a python pattern, and wearing a smoke pier cap, looking at the paintings on the wall with his negative hand. The eunuchs with sticks were all left by the original Dongchang. They were good at this and beat their inner concubines to faint. The ancestors spared their lives. This little inner sobbed silently. Fu Man turned around and said, What happened to Chu Jun while you were serving? If you want to survive, you must explain to our family. These in-laws who waited were all entered into the palace by Emperor Tianqian. Up to now, even Chu Jun did not know what poison was, and could not explain anything at all. Fu Man was patient and said, You can think about what the governor of the day ate and wore. The people in the wine and vinegar scene were so mixed, and maybe they mixed in a few things with a heartfelt feeling. Why can't you think of it now? The inner concubine heard something, but he didn't dare to guess arrogantly, and still couldn't say it. Fu Man hated the iron and shook his sleeve like steel, letting the old with a stick continue to fight. The inner concubine was soaked with blood in his mouth. He yanked his stool, and wept sobbing, Don't hit! Ancestral ancestor. I say. Fuman ignored it. The impotent swallowed the blood and said, "The wine and vinegar face, and the Siu and bureau, are a little new face." Fu Man turned to his side and coaxed softly, "You all come and go?" Infighting shook his head hard and didn't dare to answer this sentence. He lifted his eyes, tempted Fuman's face, and whispered, "I don't know." "You don't know? How do you know which round they are in?" Fu Man guided him intentionally. "Someone has to tell you before you know." The insider said, "Look at the temple, watch the door." "Well," Fu Man stooped, "can the janitor be next to Chu Jun? Whoever serves Chu Jun usually knows him best." The inner concubine did not dare to pant, said along the way, "I am always served by Fengquan." Fu Man gently patted him and said, "This will end." The case fell into the hands of Fu Man, and it was certainly impossible to detect the real murder. He was instructed by Han Kuan to block people in the Li Jianting Hall. Poison has nothing to do with wine and vinegar. The problem lies in the chopsticks that Li Jianting ate on the day. When Chu Jun fell down, the hall was in a mess, and Fu Man had already stolen the beams and changed the pillars, and packed everything up. When Fuman was out of the hall, before going out of the yard, he saw several men who raised the sedan waiting for him under the locust tree outside. As soon as the officials under the supervision of the Ministry of Criminal Affairs left, Fu Man was vigilant, rolled up his robe, and stepped out with a smile. "Which gentleman is looking for me? Just let me know, so why do I have to ask for it? Coincidentally, you have to work on a case, you can't get away." The curtain opened and Han Yen sneered a few times. A few days later, the dog thing picked up Joe with your grandfather. "Why? I can't move you anymore. It's this dog day again." Fu Man bowed down obediently and said, "Slave is the old thing in the cabinet, and the dogskin plaster is sticking to me for investigation. I'm annoyed. I didn't want to be you. See what you said, the slave saw you, what is it, oh Ruyan Tu Lin?" He pretends to be stupid and knows that Han Yen will eat this set. Han Yen looked a little stubborn, didn't tangle with him any more, fell off the curtain, and said, "Follow me." Fu Man went all the way and scolded all the way, all in his heart. When I arrived at the place, it was Han Yan's private house, and I knew that Titing was going to ask him about the case of Chu Jun. When he entered the door, before he could flatter, he saw all the knives inside brightly, and immediately forgot what he was going to say, and threw himself on his knees. "Look at you," Han Yun poured tea into the pot without making Fu full and said, "Want to learn Panrugi? You deserve it too." "It's not worth it, it's definitely not worth it." Fu Man held on to the ground and reluctantly smiled. "A slave is a slut. How can you compare with the ancestor? Don't dare to have that kind of heart." Han Zheng put the teapot back and said, "I let you kill Li Jianting. What poison did you get?" With cold sweat permeating on Fuman's back, he couldn't hesitate. He said as he thought it 1,000 times in his heart, "Slave follows the commander's instructions, and the next thing is slam chase." "That's weird," Han Yen teased. "This medicine can poison a few strong men, but not a woman?" Fuman felt that the back of his neck was cold. It was a real knife, which had already reached him. The muscles on his face twitched, and suddenly raised his hand to slap himself, changing his face and crying, "What are you talking about, the slave's heart? How dare slavery dare to murder his own father with an outsider?" Besides Shui Yanqing and Kong Yen, a few of them didn't look at the people, and they used slaves as animals. What slaves really did was the chase, and the chopsticks were still there. Fu Man cried halfway, wiping tears. "Slaves are wondering, it's absolutely terrible, but it's following," and Chu Jun just vomited a few times. "This is not a ghost." Han Yen had a blue complexion. Li Jianting's life and death depended on the situation. He even took out the 8 major camps, betting that Chu Jun would die, but Li Jianting was okay. The Danqing case is not settled yet, which means to continue the investigation. Without Pan, the next turn should be Helian Hu Fei's turn, and everyone in Qiqing is in danger. "Can you tell someone about poisoning?" Fu Man quickly said, How dare you be a slave? You'd better not dare. Han Yen threw away the teacup in his hand. This is what you do, and you have to pack it now. Those in her temple can't stay, and take advantage of this opportunity to kill all. If Li Jianting is chasing, she will die. Either someone changed the poison or Fumin didn't chase after all. In any case, the people who waited in her dormitory could not stay anymore, and there might be other people mixed in it. It's treacherous, and the rootless, sloppy leather man most often sees the wind to the helm, and Fu Man is not a good thing. Right now the family is damaged, and it is hard to guarantee that he will not be able to be full of other minds. It would be a woe to keep him. Han Yun is suspicious by nature, and now he is like a bird who is frightened by a bough. He got up and looked at Fu Man, approached a few steps, and was already killing. Seeing that he was about to be in a different place immediately, Fu Man shouted anxiously, "Yuan Fu, order me to investigate the case, there is still a turn for the better. The commander does not need to worry, I will clean up. All the officials of the penal department supervised it's an acquaintance, and if something goes wrong, I raise my head to see the commander." Han Yen couldn't really kill him at this moment. When he saw his face turned pale and unpromising, he said, "This thing is broken again. Even if I want to keep you, the Queen Mother won't keep you. I want to be an ancestor. You must have that ability." Fu Manlian claims to be in shock. Niandu was rainy and the battlefield was sunny. The 3 battalion owners will rotate, and today is Xiao Qia to the 1st Battalion. Lu Guangbai sent his army account to welcome him. Xiao Qia took off his helmet and greeted him. Lu Guangbai jumped up to catch Xiao Qia's helmet, saw the dent above, and said, "Hassan played the trebuchet better than us." Xiao Qia handed the reins to Chenyang, stood in place and dismantled his arms, and said, "Yesterday the watchtower of the 2nd Battalion was smashed. You quickly send a message to the master and let the military craftsmen go to the 2nd Battalion. Nather Ming sent a new batch of soldiers to go here. If you can't wait, I will let the soldiers in Bianboing make up." Lu Guangbai returned the helmet to Chenyang. The walls of the 3 battalions were repaired and collapsed. "Now, Master Qianqiu will leave you with no staff." Xiao Qia tanned his skin during this time, and watched hovering over the camp, saying, "The number of Bianxia cavalry is increasing." After the Duanzhou Scorpion was under siege, Hassan began to storm. Most obviously in March, Xiao Qia noticed that Hassan was frantically mobilizing manpower in the east, and the number of edge cavalry increased rapidly. Last year, they could only attack the main force, relying on the remaining soldiers to make a roundabout sneak attack. A battalion. Amor put Hassan to the north, but he didn't go south, Lu Guangbai said, because he wants to expand the territory in the deep desert, so that the remaining 6 will be returned as soon as possible. Hassan can now have a cavalry attacking at the same time. I am afraid that is a more new boost. Xiao Qia wiped the dust on his cheeks thoughtfully. Lu Guangbai continued, "But Hassan has been playing very unstable recently. Achi was killed by Xiao Qia. Hassan thought that Xiao Qia would take the new iron to ride out of the camp wall when he returned to the battlefield, but Xiao Qia did not do so. Without it, Hassan couldn't face Xiao Qia's new iron riders face to face. They seem to have changed positions. The unknown is an unpreventable danger, and Xiao Qia is taking Hassan's initiative. Hassan fought in the north and south battlefields all in the hands of the winners," Xiao Qia said. "Part of his victory came from his familiarity with the generals. The battle that Qi Juin fought in the battlefield is proof that Xiao Jiming noticed this and therefore disrupted the order of the battlefield. When Hassan met Li Beiki again, he understood what Xiao Jiming was doing. Xiao Jiming is the commander-in-chief of the type that Hassan doesn't like most, because he can't keep up with the pace and won't worry. He seems to be able to always stay calm. This is both Xiao Jiming's character and Xiao Jiming's style. He knew he couldn't beat Hassan, so he didn't want to share the win or lose with Hassan on the battlefield atmosphere. All he had done in these months was to ease the rhythm of leaving north. Tiechi is recovering, and even if he can't win, he won't be dragged away by Hassan as before. Hassan is anxious when he stands next door, Xiao Qia said in a deep voice. After all, he only wants to win. Xiao Jiming wants to leave the opportunity to Xiao Qia. Lu Guangbai looked at Xiao Qia and said, Amor has invested his life in his life. His victory is related to the dignity of the 12. If he cannot win this battle, he cannot be a 12. Minister of the future. Xiao Qia didn't care why Hassan won, he just wanted Hassan's head. Lu Guangbai seemed to understand this, and did not continue. Instead, he said, Hassan's anxiety also comes from the south. The boss hit the mouse department and they also face pressure from both sides. But is Hassan really anxious because of the north-south battlefield? Xiao Qia thinks that Hassan's onslaught during this time has another meaning. Hassan may want to use this blinding method to conceal his goal. Compared with consumption from the north and Qidong, Zhongbua is the best place to play. Hassan is very good at disguising. Xiao Qia is like a wolf lingering in the dark, staring at every action of Hassan. His understanding of Hassan far exceeds that of Hassan. The author has something to say. He is late again. If I were Hussein, Xiao Qia crouched down, drawing a sketch on the sand, I will fight Duanzhou. If I were Hussein, Xiao Qia crouched down, drawing a sketch on the sand, I will fight Duanzhou. Shun Zichuan cut off the heavy line in Amur in Duanzhou, and Hassan's rations could only be distributed to the 6th Desert Unit. Earlier this year, Amur allowed Hassan to marry Doriman precisely because he needed the Hulu to supply food to the front line. The Biancha cavalry has no chance of robbery since June last year. This is the root cause of Hassan's anxiety. Then you have to think clearly. Lu Guangbai also squatted down, picked up a stone and pressed it on Xiao Qia's Duanzhou. As long as you attack Duanzhou, Shun Zichuan will call the stand-in tiger behind him. You start a battle in Duanzhou, and then Shun Zichuan issues a transfer order to Bianjuan and Shasan Battalion, and the reinforcements on both sides can trap you in Duanzhou and let you never come back. I can run. Xiao Qia's forefinger circled along the stone. I have the fastest cavalry. The purpose is not to retake Duanzhou, but to rob Duanzhou granary. On the return trip, I can also surprise the newly built Luoshan. On the racetrack, the reinforcements on both sides cannot catch up. You forgot the commander, said Lu Guangbai. You leave the battlefield, the commander will follow the current and go around Geedle to kick your ass. Just what I want. Xiao Qia flipped the stone to Bian County. The commander detoured to Gedale, and I gave the green mouse part to the bear part, so that the bear part could intercept the coach's retreat, trapped her in Goodle and smashed. Lu Guangbai blocked the stone with his back, saying, Since the commander dares to go alone, there must be a backup. She can transfer the Tsang County Defense Force to Bian County, and when the Bear Department sends troops to stop the road, let the Tsang County Defense Force fight back. Moreover, the Bear Ministry has not yet surrendered to Amur. You may let them come out as shields to block guns. They may not be willing. They must be willing, Xiao Qia said. There was a Bear Department that was unwilling to surrender to Amur because a Mouse Department was in front of them as a wall to stop Qidong's garrison. But now the Mouse Department was killed by the commander. There are bears who can't resist the next round of offense of the commander. They can only get Amur's reinforcements if they surrender. Lu Guangbai hesitated for a moment and put the stone back into Duanzhou again, saying, Okay, if the commander doesn't move, I will stay in Luoshan in advance. I will destroy the road from Luoshan to Duanzhou during the raid, said Xiao Qia. Without the road, you have to circle around Luoshan in situ and watch my cavalry leave. Lu Guangbai pushed the stone and said, You have to cross the river on your return trip. I am ambushed at the Chasha River. Even if you spent my troops on the Chasha River, Xiao Qia looked up. My purpose has been achieved. Lu Guangbai touched the bridge of his nose with his fingertips and smiled bitterly. It's cruel. The Chasha River is the Gobi and the wilderness. Lu Guangbai's ambush depends on the terrain. He has no advantage in the Chasha River. Chariot formation can resist the cavalry's attack, but cannot pursue the cavalry. Lu Guangbai cannot catch up with the cavalry. If Shao Qia's speculation is correct, then Hassan can not only get supplies in this raid, but also reblock Qi Juin in the south, reducing his pressure in the north. Shao Qia stretched out 5 fingers, covered the map, and said, "Hassan has eyes in Badu, and he can see the big picture." In the twilight, smoke was rising from the camp. Lu Guangbai simply sat on the ground. He held the stone in his palm, and saw the orange-red stain on the camp wall. In the last glory, he said to Shao Qia, "You can't walk away." Hassan stormed the battlefield, and they were all restrained here, too busy to separate. The onslaught means that he is starting to run out of food. Shao Qia stared at the map between his fingers. If he can't hold us back, he will lose some elite in Duanzhou. Hassan suppresses the main forces of the 3 camps in the battlefield. Only when the 3 main forces are exhausted, can he let his elite attack on Duanzhou. When the time is far from the north, he is tired of fighting, and the threat of reinforcements to Hassan is reduced. That is his best time. Lu Guangbai threw the stone to Shao Qia and said, "This is the time we can control. As long as you see Hassan's purpose, this raid is no longer terrible. Hassan can disguise, as can riding from the north rail. The war of attrition is not good for both sides, but compared to Shao Qia, he has the supply of military food for Shinzichuan. Until the battle, the only person who really threatened Amur was Shinzichuan. His supply line is like a spider web, making the 3 realms of the east solid. Drag time to the end of June." Shao Qia caught the stone and placed it on the scribbled map. "I took the 2nd Battalion to the Edge County. You and Master can show fatigue under the onslaught of Hassan, as long as his offensive weakened, which was to strike the precursor of Duanzhou, and I was waiting for him in Duanzhou. The 3 months are just right. When Hassan dispatched a raid, it was a season with plenty of Tsangjia, and he would not miss this time." The 2 said that at this time it was dark. Shao Qia stood up, whistled into the sky, fluttered and turned, and after a while fell back to his shoulder. Lu Guangbai patted his robe and walked side by side with Shao Qia into the army account. Chen Yang waited at the door and lifted the curtains for them, whispering when Shao Qia entered the account. "The letters of the master, the prince and the bones have arrived." Shao Qia took the letter and stood looking at the door. Lu Guangbai drank half a bowl of milk tea. He didn't hear Shao Qia's movement. He turned around and saw Shao Qia's gloomy look. A few days later, Fu Man heard that he arrived at the cabinet office. Before changing into the door, he changed his wet cover and stepped in with a robe to salute Kong Yen. Kong Yen sat next to the window and only said, to signal Fuman to get up first. Fu straightened up, restrained, and stood at the end. He turned his eyes around the black boots on the side and recognized the courtiers. Just after the spring plowing ended, Huaizhou bought a batch of grain from Bema Prefecture, and Shan converted him at the price of Jushi rice. Liang Yenshan finished his speech. Kong Yen lost a few white hairs during this time, hiding in the black hat, and could not see clearly. He said, "Now that Qidong is fighting, it is natural that the army should take Qidong first, and the military expenses of the 8 major battalions can be reduced as appropriate." Fu Manxin said, "When the cabinet wants to check the 8-city account if he wishes, he must first cut off Han's potential." "That's what the Ministry of Defense means," said Chen Zhen of the Ministry of Military Affairs, who slammed the cigarette twice. But Han Yun refused. He wanted a ticket from the cabinet. "He wants to approve the red," said Sun Yu. "The Danqing case has not yet been concluded, and the Queen Mother cannot approve to avoid suspicion. Since the cabinet has given you meaning, everyone agrees with him, so he depends on it. The Queen is now unable to protect herself. Where can I still have the previous bonus right? Watching Huasher are at ease. What poison in Chu Jun? Everyone here knows it." Kong Xian threw Chu Jun's case to Fu Man and asked the inner court to investigate, which was to save the last face of the Queen. Han Zheng also occupied the position of commander of Jin Yiwei. This is to follow the old path of Hua Xiqian, relying on the 8 major camps to fight against the cabinet. Blessings are all around Fuman, waiting is now, the family of this ship cannot wait, he can jump to the cabinet of the ship. He showed his face in front of Hai Liangyi and spent the longest time in the cabinet-run office. The ancestor of Xiao Guai was not called casually, but he did have this weight. He held the case of Chu Jun so tightly, one was to pick himself up, and the other was to make Fengquan a scapegoat. Emperor Tianqin favored Ruru. When he promoted Fengquan, he provoked the cabinet. At that time, all the procuratoriates were impeached. Later, Emperor Tianqin died in Mu Ru's hands. Fengquan borrowed Shuexiujua's light to survive. Fu Man didn't dare to provoke Shuexiujua, but he had already seen clearly that Chu Jun was the master of Dezhou coming to Japan. He had to kick Fengquan in order to get a place beside Chu Jun. He would count on Chu Jun for his prosperity and wealth for decades to come. Yet, Han Han and Kong Yen Fu Man both looked down on. Think about Pan Rugi. Pan Rugi was able to gather with Pan Dang and sit on an equal footing with Hua Xiqian, relying on the trust of Emperor Guangqing. Eunuchs are not easy to do, and they are called as dogs, but once they find the right master, that is the dog over 10,000 people. Everyone who sees it must call the ancestor respectfully. Fu Man was thinking. Suddenly he noticed that Kong Yen was looking at himself. He immediately stepped forward and bowed, followed by 2 looks in front of Han Yen. Fuman said respectfully, Yuan Fu's slaves checked and the slaves have already found out. The seasonal vegetables used by Chu Jun that day were all imported by our company. Isn't that just for the palace? Kong Yen said, Who is the chief eunuch? It's called Inju, Fu Man continued. The slaves carefully asked the people who were serving in the Chujun Hall, and they couldn't stand close to Siyuan Bureau. The palace was very strict, and they didn't even meet. The Siyuan Bureau has problems with the vegetables. It can also be delivered to Chu Jun's table through such multiple layers. If the person in charge is not capable, it will not be possible. They all figured out that it would not be possible without half a year of effort. Fu Man replied in a continuous voice, saying, Slave really found the individual. Kong Yen looked at Sun Yu and asked, Who? Blessing looked, hesitated, and for a moment he said, It is Fengquan. Fengquan used to be a palm print in Silijian, and the Siyuan Bureau was also under the jurisdiction of the palm print eunuch, which was also related to Shangjian. He is not only Chu Jun's but also the one to be protected by his mother-in-law. Compared with the blessing of flattery, Fengquan can't clear the suspicion. Kong Yen frowned and said, Isn't this man dead? Yeah, Fu Man said softly. But he stayed with Chu Jun for more than half a year and looked different. When Mingletang was waiting, he didn't recognize him. Kong Yen didn't say a word immediately. They were silent, and they heard Shuexiujua arrive at the door. Liang Yishan knows how to save lives, and the internal affairs of Chu Jun are not something he can blend in with. He took the opportunity to stand up and backed out when Shuexiujua came in. Shuexiujua's black silk hat was slightly tied, covered with some rainwater. When he came in, he saw Fu Man waiting by the side, and he didn't ask, saluting Kong Yen. Kong Zheng didn't mention the matter of Fengquan, let Shuexiujua sit down and talk. The chashi thawed, and the warm spring in Duanzhou suddenly disappeared, with drizzle for several days. The peach blossoms in the courtyard ran out, and the rain made the ground red. Shinzichuan wanted to discuss matters with the gentleman in the hall. For a few hours, Fei Xing added a charcoal basin to the cold in the hall. Yen Haru didn't show up for so long, and Hezhou's business was messed up. Businessmen were noisy, and they were afraid that the business appointments at the beginning of the year would be yellow. They went to Chazhou and wanted to talk to the government. Yu Shao sat again Kong Ling's lower head, next to the charcoal basin, continued, "The port side has to deal with the local yamen, and we must send a person as soon as possible." "Yao Wenyu looked okay today," he said. "Just after the spring plowing, all the gates can be deployed. Chazhou also has a Wang Xian who is familiar with taxes, and there is no reason for the governors to meet them in person. How to do business in the past, how to do it now." Shen Zichuan held Tangpu in his palm. "A Wang Xian is enough." Wang Xian used to be the head of the Ministry of Household Affairs. He dealt with various ministries. Even Xiao Qie touched the wall in front of him, so it was most appropriate for him to talk with businessmen. The Liuzhou prefecture is where the Yan family is in the relationship. Ask them if they can find Yanharu. If they can't find it, Shen Zichuan turned over the case and said, "Hurry up and push someone who can do it." Qi Juin has returned to Qidong. Yan's family has to send the rest of the military rations in April. Yanharu must not find it. It has been overturned at home. Shen Zichuan reminded them. The food was delivered. Today's things are almost the same. Shen Zichuan said that Xiao Tianya had not returned from the schoolyard and said, "Yu Jing said the details of the gates in various states. The situation is very mixed and you can't generalize it. You go back and make up a booklet. In the case of the might of God, just be concise. Master is in my yard, and Yuanzhua will eat with me today." The gentlemen stood up one after another and retired to Fujuanxing. Ji Gang watched Ding Tao punching under the eaves, and when the gentleman came out, he sent Ding Tao to order the kitchen to prepare vegetables. Keeping Fei Xing's instructions in mind, Ding Tao left Li Xiong in the yard to protect the monarch. He himself jumped down the steps in a few steps to spread the message. Yao Wenyu was originally pushed by Qiao Tianya, but in recent days it has been Ji Gang. When Qiao Tianya returned, the sky was already dark. Ding Tao stood by the side of Li Xiongman, holding his arm, and said indifferently to Qiao Tianya, "You can't enter without the prince." Qiao Tianya struck Ding Tao's head and lifted the curtain to look at the house. "Mr. is gone." Ding Tao broke free. "I used Grandpa to ask my grandfather to push him back." "Don't you say it earlier?" Qiao Tianya asked. "How about the prince?" "The governor should rest," Ding Tao said. "It's in the bathroom now. The windows inside the hall don't call people to close, the cold wind is strong in the evening." Qiao Tianya scared Ding Tao. Ding Tao really forgot about this stubble, he said. "I remember, I'm about to close," Ding Tao said, turning into the hall and closing the windows one by one. When he stepped back, he held a hard object in his head. He quickly held his head, thinking that Fei Xing was back. He was preparing to speak, and shrank he snored around his neck. Xiao Qie put down his wolf knife blocking Ding Tao, and slightly tilted his head to find Shen Zichuan. His face was wet, rain and sweat, his heavy armor was not removed, and his boots were dirty. This is when the horse came off the battlefield and rushed back. The author has something to say, it's late. When Shen Zichuan returned to the house, the rain was still falling. He was wearing a robe and no wooden clogs. He heard a few thunderous thunders in the small corridor leading to the sleeping room. The moist wind rushed to his cheek through the newly cut window screen. The sound dispelled Shen Zichuan's sedentary breath. When Shen Zichuan returned to the house, the rain was still falling. He was wearing a robe and no wooden clogs. He heard a few thunderous thunders in the small corridor leading to the sleeping room. The moist wind rushed to his cheek through the newly cut window screen. The sound dispelled Shen Zichuan's sedentary breath. A candlestick stands beside the corridor, which is brighter than the dormitory. Shen Zichuan seems to want to ventilate and stands there without moving. The shadow passed through the bamboo curtain and was exposed on the rafters in the dormitory. The orange candle light haloed his silhouette, and the neck of the slight side was a bit red. April is the season for growing seedlings. If this spring rain continues, the fields near Duanzhou and Chaisha River may be flooded by spring floods. Shen Zichuan gave Kong Ling the order of the Duanzhou Dam last month, but he forgot to ask today. Now Fei Xing should be back. Shen Zichuan lifted the bamboo curtain, looking for the clogs kicked off by him in the sleeping room, ready to call Fei Xing to come in and question. Xiao Qia had taken off his armor a long time ago, lying on the bed with his arms folded, and found sleepy. He turned over and turned his head up when Lanzhao picked up the wooden clogs. Shun Zichuan was unprepared, startled, and the clogs dropped. Xiao Qia just hung up and asked, "Is the master's thing real?" Shun Zichuan's expression narrowed slightly, and he nodded. Xiao Qia watched Shun Zichuan nod, his heart hanging all the way out of the ditch. He fell back to the quilt, spread his arms, and looked almost dead. Shun Zichuan braced his bed and looked at Xiao Qia, and said tentatively, "Did you come back for this matter?" Xiao Qia ran all over the north to find a lamp, stared at Xiao Jiming and wrote a dozen letters to the master. As a result, he didn't see each other, and people were gone. He was silent for a long time and said, "What about Yen Haru?" Shun Zichuan gestured cruelly around his neck. Xiao Qia looked cold for a while, then turned over suddenly, burying his face in the pillow, and not showing it to Shun Zichuan. If he had a tail, it would be time to pull it to the ground. "Let's go to the doctor in Jueshi." Xiao Qia paused before he said, "Yudu still has a hospital." Shun Zichuan didn't say a word, covered his cold hand on the side of Xiao Qia's neck, and touched his cheek upward. Xiao Qia caught this hand and held it in his palm. The rain wiped out the anger, and the rest was loss and panic. He tried to ease the mood, but it felt too complicated. "Suan," Shun Zichuan called him. Xiao Qia said, "There are countless masters of Xinglin who are reclusive in the world, and some are looking for some, as long as they are doctors." Shun Zichuan pulled out his hand suddenly. Xiao Qia wanted to sit up as soon as his palm was empty, but Shun Zichuan pressed his back and pressed him back. Shun Zichuan braced his arm, a rare toughness. He bowed his head and said, "You have heard Master Qianqiu's words. A master may not be able to eradicate it completely. But this body is not so bad." He slowed his voice. "My pills are being taken on time, and I haven't gotten sick this year." Xiao Qia's ambushing back was tight. Shun Zichuan put his head on Xiao Qia's back shoulder and said softly, "I won't leave you." The rain outside was dense, and Xiao Qia's chest was wet. Shun Zichuan's side face was pasted on Xiao Qia's body across the fabric. "There was a scar here." "You lied to me." Xiao Qia also answered softly. Xiao Qia used to think that Xiao Fangxu would not leave him, but he was so rushed separately that he did not even say goodbye to his father. There is a boundary between man and man. Crossing over and calling it death is another world that can't catch up. "You gave this life to Tai Fu." Xiao Qia's voice seemed dull in the dimness. "You made an oath to him to kill vendetta, and you stand alone in front of the family without any fear. You are going to let me go, and hurt themselves in Chazhou and Dunzhou. These are the hidden dangers left by those two accidents. They were hidden in Xiao Qia's heart and became intolerable after Xiao Fangxu's departure. Xiao Qia would be afraid if he remembered it. His panic came not only from Shun Zichuan's body, but also from Shun Zichuan. Xiao Qia said, "Lanzhao, you can keep me hard. The author has something to say. Only 1,000 words today, 2 chapters tomorrow." Feeling bad during this time, the update time is pushed back 1 hour, and it will be updated every night at 2000 hours. Children who want to take the college entrance examination hurriedly study to be happy. It is easy to get tired of the long story, and the final volume is not satisfactory. Today, I am adjusting my status and can feel that I am recovering. Moving from 4th to 6th month next month, I can see if I can save it in these days. It's exactly 240 days to start today. Oh my God! When I wrote the outline, I thought that the limit of 600,000 words was over, and now I don't think it will reach 900,000. The handling of the final volume is very difficult. How to say it is very difficult. It is the cause of anxiety during this time. I feel that I have handled it badly. However, this is also the original intention of the practice. I still want to be more compact and see if these chapters can bring back my own rhythm. The wish is over in one go. Everyone has worked hard for these 8 months. This chapter is empty. Please continue from the next one. This chapter is empty. Please continue from the next one. Xiao Qia said, not tired, but fell asleep in a whisper. The time for him to rest in the 2nd Battalion was very tight, because Luoshan was close to Duanzhou and the road was smooth, so he could rush back to sleep with Lanzhou. Xiao Qia said, not tired, but fell asleep in a whisper. The time for him to rest in the 2nd Battalion was very tight, because Luoshan was close to Duanzhou and the road was smooth, so he could rush back to sleep with Lanzhou. In the middle of the night, there were a few distant spring thunders, and the rain became heavier. Xiao Qia had something in mind, and Yinshe woke up. Shun Zichuan was holding his uncle to breathe well, and slept soundly. Xiao Qia listened to Lanzhou's breathing for a while, and he was inexplicable. Shun Zichuan was awake and uttered a voice. He liked to prolong his nasal sound, and he couldn't tell whether it was painful or cool every time. Xiao Qia bit him, letting him shake lightly in his breath. Don't bite. Shun Zichuan didn't wake up, his voice was dumb, his eyes didn't open. He said indistinctly, red. It's really red. Shun Zichuan was awake a bit, and was forced to hide nowhere, next to each other, as if attacked by rain. There was no distance between them, and the sweat spread to the chest, soaking up the bedding. Xiao Qia bowed his head, and put his ear against Lanzhou's lip. Shun Zichuan is going to break. In this wet and sticky atmosphere, I know what Xiao Qia wants to hear. His mixed nasal voice said love, his eyes filled with ambiguity, and he trembled intermittently in the waves of beatings. The disadvantage of being too tacit is that when you leave for a moment, you will be mad. You have to slacken up and make up for the gap of separation with joy. Xiao Qia wanted. Still want. Okay. Shun Zichuan didn't hold back. His wet neck was slightly lifted, which was fragile when bearing. The noise of the rain was noisy. When the door rang, Shun Zichuan raised his hand and hung up, but was caught in the wrist in midair. Xiao Qia held his wrist, and the dark-colored arm held him firmly. The people outside the door waited for a while and knocked again. Shun Zichuan said depressively, no, not Fee. Xiao Qia didn't care who was at the door. He wanted to occupy. Only he can see, bite, and force Lanzhou to ask for mercy. The 2 men staggered. Chuaner? It's 2 minutes later. Qing Feng is going to go down to see the field. Will you go? If I go, I'll prepare the clothes for you, and you can drink the soup before passing by. Ji Gang got up early and punched a few. Come here with the soup. Xiao Qia angrily hissed, and pushed the excess away, restraining Lanzhou. It's too deep. Shun Zichuan said silently. I too. He tilted his head to bury the smooth pant in the bedding, hiding in the depth of the rain. Xiao Qia was also panting. He laughed dangerously in that heavy gasp, without stopping, admiring the flushing on the side of Lanzhou's neck. Terribly. Xiao Qia thought maliciously. He was relieved by this possession. Ji Gang did not hear the movement, turned to ask Fei Xing, when did the governor sleep last night? Fei Xing thought I couldn't say this. He gave Ji Gang's bird cage an umbrella and said, it's a late night. Mr. Yu is back these days, and wants to tell the governor about the Liuzhou Shumen. Don't you retire early yesterday? Ji Gang was worried that Shun Zichuan fell ill in the spring rain. Jiu Jing will have to wait until the rain stops when he returns this time. He is not in a hurry to do business. It's such a rationale, Fei Xing echoed. Master, your elderly knows best. Fei Xing just wanted to quickly send Master out of the yard. The second grandfather was still in the room. After a while, I met him. Wouldn't it be over? He lifted Ji Gang's bird cage and said, Master, why doesn't this bird look mentally? Don't freeze it. When you're full, you'll be sleepy. This bird has the virtue of Ding Tao's sparrow. Ji Gang hasn't heard Shun Zichuan's answer to the door for so long, and is more worried, saying, there's no one in the room to serve. Will I take you to the side hall? Let's drink a few cups of hot tea, and the master should wake up in a moment. Ji Gang lifted the bird cage back, and when Fei Xing picked up the soup, he held up his hand and said, "I can't sit still, go to Yuan Zhuo to see, the medicine is still boiled." After a while, Chuaner wakes up, "You ask he can't get out, so heavy rain, I have to follow." Fei Xing responded, bending over and sending Ji Gang to the porch. After watching Ji Gang going out, he hurriedly carried his robe and ran back, yelling against the door and whispering, "Second master, it will be 3 moments later. The gentleman should be here, our governor." The door opened to the sides in a rush. Shao Chia was wearing a loose robe, red was still around his neck, and his sweat had not returned. Fei Xing dared to look straight, and immediately stepped back to salute, and said, "Greeting to the second grandpa." Shao Chia took the hot papa waiting beside him, wiped the sweat from his neck and said, "Hurry up, your master usually sleeps late and sleeps lightly, can withstand your toss like this?" Fei Xing responded and said, Yi is still thoughtful." Shao Chia threw Par back to the tray, and was trying to say something. Suddenly, Ji Gang Yuan, who had just left, returned and went down the corridor, staring straight at the end. Fei Xing looked back and said, "Hey, my mother." Ji Gang walked meteorically towards this side. Fei Xing looked at Ji Gang's complexion and wanted to retreat, and he wanted to see it again. So he stepped forward boldly, stopped Ji Gang and said with a grin, "Master, what has fallen? It's okay to just send a person over here. Why did you come back specially? It rained so much." Ji Gang couldn't get around Fei Xing from the left and right. He suddenly lifted Fei Xing's plaque, and put Fei Xing, who was higher than himself, on the side. Shao Chia said, "Master." "I'm not your master," Ji Gang yelled, his hands trembling, watching Shao Chia's waves. He took a half step back, pointing at him, "How dare you, how dare you!" He already felt wrong from the last whipping, but he didn't dare to think about Shen Zichuan with those thoughts, so he comforted himself in all possible ways, and was still beaten by the head. "That's Shen Zichuan." Ji Gang was raining on his back, both ridiculous and furious. He buzzed in his ears as if slapped it into his face, stepped back unsteadily. Fei Xing held up Master Fu, but Ji Gang shook his hands and asked, "You know? Do you know?" Fei Xing Qiang laughed. "This." Ji Gang threw the bird cage to the ground, and the bird tossed in the cage in a panic, rolled a few circles and fell under the step. His hand was shaking so badly that he was still fierce, and when he punched out, he smashed into the face, making Shao Chia's teeth ooze with blood. Fei Xing had rushed up, holding Ji Gang's arm and shouting, "Master, Master is angry." The rain crackled. Shao Chia pressed his tongue against the smell of blood and said, "Master wants to hit me, I am willing to suffer. Master wants me to kneel, and I am willing to kneel. But if Master wants to find a door for Lanzhou, dear, no one can do this." Ji Gang attacked side by side this year, and did not dare to push Shen Zichuan too tightly, and he was still in a hurry. He found a few girls in Cizhou and mentioned them to Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan did not respond, but only said that there were individuals who were close to him. Ji Gang did not see this thoughtful person in Duanzhou until he was wondering if Shen Zichuan was coaxing himself, but he did. "You!" Ji Gang broke his arm and said arrogantly, "I killed you, jerk. The author has something to say. I can't wait to publish it first." Today it is said that the 2 chapters are actually 4,000 words. Sorry, 2K Novel Reading Network. Ji Gang watched Shen Zichuan grow up to such a large size, and did not want Shen Zichuan to seal the visit. He only hoped that Shen Zichuan would be safe and smooth, and that he would be able to form a group of children in the future. Shao Chia's foot in Badu, anyone can forget, Ji Gang can't forget, this is his only son. Ji Gang watched Shen Zichuan grow up to such a large size, and did not want Shen Zichuan to seal the visit. He only hoped that Shen Zichuan would be safe and smooth, and that he would be able to form a group of children in the future. Shao Chia's foot in Badu, anyone can forget, Ji Gang can't forget, this is his only son. Ji Gang now remembered what Xiao Qie said in Sizhou, as if it had been premeditated. This had long been thinking of a showdown with him. It's ridiculous that everyone can see clearly, but he just deceived himself and justified the junk in his heart. What brotherhood is shit? Ji Gang made a few punches to resolve his hatred. He picked up the whip on the sideline and said, I led the wolf into the room and believed your kid's words. You've been thinking of Chuaner as early as Ibaraki. Xiao Qie's goodness was not expected at all remembered our old accounts. He lifted his whip and was furious. I will kill you! Master, master! How could Fei Xing allow Ji Gang to continue persuading? The second grandfather is willing to be beaten by the master, and he really wants to tell the master. This can't stand outsiders, just sit down in his yard. Talk about it, the prince is waiting for you. You get away! Ji Gang yelled. You guys are a bunch! Jin Wei in this courtyard has been instructed by Ji Gang. All said that he was an apprentice to Ji Gang. Looking at Ji Gang as a fierce tiger, who dared to stop it. This whip is still Xiao Qie, which is much heavier than the one in Sizhou, and it looks like it's exploded when it is clicked, and the hot pain straightens up. Ji Gang was really angry. Unlike the one in Sizhou, he couldn't stop the robe. All the blood strips hit him, and Xiao Qie took a few breaths. Ji Gang saw Xiao Qie admit his mistake and hated. I tell him whether it's your offense. No, Xiao Qie refused to let it go. He wouldn't tell the truth. There is more to go in the world, except Xin Lanzhao, I won't give it to anyone. Ji Gang was dizzy and pointed at him with a whip and said, If you want to kill my son, you will have to kill him for the rest of your life. If you don't want a wife or a child, why don't you clean it yourself? The broken sleeves in Badu are not a secret. Ji Gang saw many of them when he was a Jinwei. Now inseparable, like glue, but after a few years, they have to marry a wife and have children, not to mention Xiao Qie or Xiao Fengshu's sister-in-law. Xiao Jiming didn't enter the battle. Xiao Qie was going to take over this burden, and later made the North Wolf. Marrying or not wifing is not his own business, that is the whole thing from North Rail riding. The Xiao family sat on an iron ride of 120,000. The two formed a good relationship with Qin and Jin. The friendship between Zhongbua and Li Bei was solid. Nods in public and private disciplines should nod, but the premise is that Xiao Qie is a girl. If he is a girl, even if he has a petite character, as long as Shun Zichuan wants, Ji Gang is willing. As long as the master willing to agree, I let sister to propose marriage, it is not I have married into the door. Qi Shaoyi even beat Xiaofeng Su are both survive. Ji Gang to face these whips not afraid. Since Ji Gang is going to settle accounts today, then Ji Gang nodded when he said today. Ji Gang was kicked back. Fei Xing quickly helped people. Ji Gang felt that Xiao Qie was not asking for a marriage, but was forcing him. He had never seen such a man with such a righteousness. Xiao Qie braced his knees and chased while winning and said, Lan Zhou took my big sister's bracelet. It was my Xiao Suan. How can master find a woman for him again? If he really sees him, he will be dejected. Master, if you want children, Ding Tao and Li Xiong are still young, and you can relieve your boredom by staying with master. If master is happy, I can raise them to 27 or 8 and send them out. Ji Gang looked at Xiao Qie seriously and arbitrarily. Ding Tao and Li Xiong are all children, and they are all 10, so it's too late to throw out the door to do business. This is not the case at all. Master nodded. Xiao Qie held his arm and drew down. If master does not nod, I will call my father. Ji Gang was so prestigious in Jinwei because he reasoned. He thought too much about Shun Zichuan in this matter. If Xiao Qie sat down to reason with Ji Gang, he would definitely not be able to convince Ji Gang. Shun Zichuan's relationship with the North Korean military rations is bound to worry that Ji Gang will now agree that whether it is for military rations or the situation. Ji Gang didn't want Xiao Qie to be faceless and skinless, but forced him to the door. Without a nod today, he would not go. Ji Gang squeezed the words from his teeth. You seldom use this set of rhetoric to lie to me. Even if your uncle really comes, I will not see you. Then seeing Lanzhou, Xiao Qia said without saying a word. Dad, Lanzhou doesn't understand these ceremonies. Without you to take care of him, he will be deceived by my aunt to leave Li Bei as a brother. Xiao Qia got stuck for a moment and quickly answered, Be my brother. If you want to complete me like this, I am also happy. Ji Gang threw the whip on the ground and said unbearably, Shut up. He had to refute Xiao Qia and then gritted his teeth. You want to come in? Xiao Qia's robe was slightly open, and the flushing around his neck faded. Ji Gang did not let him in, and he did not argue. The rain was rapid, and there was a bit of coldness under the eaves. Ji Gang's anger remained undiminished. Xiao Qia looked calmly and said positively, I have thought about Master S' worries. Brother and sister-in-law have a good relationship, and now there are children and children in the future. I do need to regenerate from the north, and I do have that idea Master looks at Lan Zhou as he grows up, hoping that his family is happy. I know, I also want to. I love him and respect him and grow old with him. Isn't it all so good? Master Ca believe me, I am afraid Lan Zhou will be wronged in the future looking for a woman for Lanzhou. I really couldn't control it, but I gave him this life, and he wanted someone else, just to kill me. Xiao Qia is not an ordinary man. He has both courage and means. Now he is a pair of beasts and looks good, but is he over? If he changes his mind, there are 10,000 ways to resolve this relationship. Ji Gang was most afraid of Shun Zichuan's loneliness 100 years later. Now everyone calls Shun Zichuan a prince. Only here is Ji Gang. Shun Zichuan is Chuaner and there is something to worry about. Ji Gang didn't dare to gamble, but Faxon couldn't believe it. Xiao Qia did not get a reply for a while, listening to the sound of wooden clogs approaching behind. He tilted his head slightly and saw Shun Zichuan's neatly groomed clothes, and glanced at him with a fan. No, Ji Gang said as if he was answering Xiao Qia, but looking at Shun Zichuan, his old face was covered with vicissitudes, and he said, This won't work. Yao Wenyu in the yard next door was lighting incense. He squeezed the citron and smoked the tiger slaves against him. As soon as the rain stopped for 2 days, it was time for mosquitoes, and Yao Wenyu couldn't stand the smell. He was looking at the smoke and was taken away. Qiao Tianya sniffed the incense to the tip of his nose, wrinkled, and said to Yao Wenyu, It's too pungent. Where can I get it? Give him back for your own use. Given by businessmen, Yao Wenyu turned the four-wheeled vehicle and faced the courtyard. The regao in Liuzhou City is expensive. Qiao Tianya took the incense and said, A smell of stinky tofu. People in Liuzhou eat stinky tofu. Yao Wenyu raised his hand and waved. Wake up with Fei Xing a moment. Don't put this incense in Fujuan's house. Qiao Tianya felt that he was avoiding himself, and he lifted his feet and jammed the four-wheeled vehicle and said, You can't see him a few times, how can you be familiar? It's all a job for the government monarch. Yao Wenyu paused and looked at Qiao Tianyao. No one is unfamiliar. Qiao Tianyao was originally a little interested, but he gradually smiled in the face of Yao Wenyu. Yao Wenyu was reluctant to look at Qiao Tianyao before, and would be ashamed to avoid it, as if always remembering the embarrassment of the night, but now he is frank, as if he is still the same piece of jade, and has not touched Ding Dian. No unfamiliar. Qiao Tianya is no different from Fei Xing, Qiao Tianya is no different from Kong Ling, Qiao Tianya is no different from everyone that Yao Wenyu meets. He is no longer a secret and special one. Yao Wenyu slumped his sleeves and was able to continue to be a fairy. It's raining today, if you are not in a hurry, you will use rice to go out again. Qingfeng and Jujing will come in the afternoon, and the genie ride should be reported. You should watch them before going out. Yao Wenyu said, looking at the uncle of the four-wheeler, and then looking at Qiao Tianyao, he said, Stuck. He smiled lightly, like helplessness and self-deprecating. The sister-in-law can get around, I can't do it, don't make fun of me. The wind was knocking on the iron horse, and several raindrops splashed on the thin blanket, and Xiao Tianya moved his foot away. He was usually so skillful, but a little embarrassed in Yao Wenyu's gaze. Yao Wenyu turned the four-wheeled vehicle into the house, and the car was on the floor, making a string of sounds. The wrists were exposed during the push, and Xiao Tianya's red rope was also tied. In the action, it was covered by the piled-up wide sleeves and disappeared in Yunbai. Ji Gang put his arms on his back, facing the wall, as if asleep. Shen Zichuan put the folding fan to the edge of the bed and asked, "Master, is he asleep?" Ji Gang opened his eyes and said, "I know Master is asleep, and I have to ask." Shen Zichuan pulled the chair closer as he was a kid and said, "I haven't had a gossip with the Master all night since I left Zhao Xin Temple." "Come for a man tonight," Ji Gang said, and the anger couldn't come out to Shen Zichuan, scattered in his chest, and turned into another kind of blame and discomfort. "Not willing. Mr. Compliment him," Shen Zichuan said softly. "The genius is not what Mr. Wen told me. Is the strange talent IKEA?" Ji Gang sat up and looked at Shen Zichuan. "The wizards are going to seek the world. Will you sit with him in a chair in the future?" Shen Zichuan's expression was well-behaved, and he squinted and said, "That's not what I say." Ji Gang sighed in the candlelight. After a long time, he said bitterly, "Tai Fu asked you how to handle yourself if you held Genie Wei. I should think this is not for students. Who can hold Genie Wei in the world? Hiding everyone, I have taught you too much. You learn so well, don't you understand? Today's wall jade is paired, and the two tigers will fight each other in the future." Xiao Qia wasn't bad, but it was so good that Ji Gang could not rest assured. "If I were a useful person," Ji Gang had a complex look and looked at Shen Zichuan. "If you have brothers alive, it would be fine to gamble with him, but I'm old and useless. When I'm 100 years old, you will be alone. To everyone in this world, only you, how can I feel relieved?" 2K Novel Reading Network